The rain lashed my face like a whip. I stood on the shoulder of the interstate, watching the taillights of that familiar black SUV disappear into the downpour. My left cheek burned, and I could taste iron in my mouth. My knee throbbed from where it had hit the pavement when I was pushed out of the car. "You better remember this, you old hag. You pull this again, and you'll be sleeping in a dumpster." The image of my daughter-in-law, Jessica, screaming those words at me from the rolled-down window was seared into my mind. In my 69 years of life, I never thought I'd be abandoned on the side of a highway by my own son. How did it come to this? I wiped the mix of rain and tears from my face, my mind reeling back to just a few hours ago. Today was my grandson Leo's 6th birthday. I'd woken up extra early to make his favorite meal, a slow-cooked pot roast and creamy mashed potatoes, packed it all into insulated containers, and took 2 different city buses for nearly 2 hours to get to their house. Ever since my husband passed away 5 years ago, my son, Michael, and his family had become my entire world. "Mom, why did you take the bus again?" "I told you we'd come pick you up," Michael said as he opened the door. He frowned when he saw the containers in my hands. "You brought more food?" "The fridge is already packed." I managed a weak smile. "Leo loves it, and it gives me something to do." Jessica walked out of the bedroom, her lips curling into a tight line when she saw what I was holding. "Mom, we're trying to follow a scientifically backed diet for him. All that butter and salt in your cooking isn't good for his development." Her words felt like a needle to my heart, but I kept the smile plastered on my face. A little treat once in a while won't hurt. Just then, Leo ran over and hugged my legs. "Grandma, I want pot roast." Jessica immediately pulled him away. "Go wash your hands first," she instructed, then lowered her voice to me. "Mom, please don't always spoil him like this." I opened my mouth to respond but said nothing. This wasn't the first time. Ever since Leo was born, the clashes over our parenting philosophies had grown more frequent. She was all about modern, gentle parenting methods she'd read about in books, while I just thought a child needed some good old-fashioned home cooking and an extra sweater when it was cold. The birthday dinner was at a fancy downtown restaurant. I felt a knot in my stomach just looking at the prices on the menu. A single meal here cost more than my entire weekly budget. Leo spent the entire time glued to a tablet, watching cartoons, while Jessica and Michael occasionally spoon-fed him a bite. I wanted to say that staring at a screen while eating was bad for his digestion, but I remembered our earlier exchange and forced myself to swallow the words. On the way home, the rain started. I sat in the back with Leo, who had fallen asleep beside me. Soft music played through the speakers as Michael and Jessica murmured to each other in the front. Staring at the blurred city lights, I found myself thinking about Michael's childhood. We were poor back then. For his birthday, the best I could do was add a fried egg to his noodles, but he would eat it with such pure joy. "Mom, what are you thinking about now?" Jessica's voice pulled me back to the present. "Look at the way Leo's sleeping. It's because you've spoiled him. He can't fall asleep unless someone is right next to him now." That was the last straw. "It's perfectly normal for a child to need a sense of security," I snapped. "When Michael was little, he also—" "Here we go again," Jessica's voice shot up. "Can you please stop applying your outdated ideas to our lives? Times have changed." "Mom, Jessica studied child psychology," Michael chimed in. "Just listen to her." A wave of indignation washed over me. You were just what?" Jessica twisted around in her seat, her eyes gleaming in the dim light of the car. "You just think we don't know how to raise our own child, is that it? Do you know what Leo's piano teacher said? That he has trouble concentrating. It's because you're always feeding him that junk food." "How is my cooking junk food?" My voice began to tremble. "When Michael was a kid—" "Shut up!" Michael roared. The car swerved violently. "It's always, when Michael was a kid, when Michael was a kid. Are you ever going to stop?" I was stunned into silence. In his entire life, Michael had never, not once, yelled at me like that. Tears welled up in my eyes. "What are you crying for now?" Jessica sneered. "You resort to tears every time you can't win an argument. Who are you trying to look pathetic for?" Just then, the shouting woke Leo, and he started to wail. Jessica immediately turned to soothe him, muttering, "See? Now you've woken him up." Michael pulled the car over onto the emergency shoulder. Before I could even process what was happening, he turned around, and the back of his hand struck my face. "Mom, can you just give it a rest?" His face, illuminated by the passing headlights, looked like a stranger's. "You're always criticizing, always telling us what to do. We don't need you running our lives." I clutched my cheek, too shocked to speak. Was this the son I had worked my fingers to the bone to raise? The same boy who would bring me an umbrella in the rain and stay by my bedside all night when I was sick? "Get out," Michael said, his voice cold as ice. "What?" I thought I had misheard him. I said, "Get out. Go cool off," he ordered. He unbuckled his seatbelt, walked around to my side, and yanked the door open. I stumbled out of the car, my legs shaking. Before I could find my footing, Michael threw my handbag out after me and slammed the door shut. Jessica rolled down her window to deliver her final, heart-shattering blow. "You better remember this, you old hag. You pull this again, and you'll be sleeping in a dumpster." And then they drove away, leaving me alone in the torrential downpour, soaked to the bone, my heart ripped to shreds. The rain fell harder. I trudged along the shoulder of the highway, my steps heavy. My phone was in my purse, but I was afraid to use it. The last time I had called Michael to tell him he was working too many hours and needed to take care of himself, Jessica had accused me of interfering in their lives. Water droplets blurred my glasses, making it impossible to see clearly. Cars sped past, spraying me with dirty water. Not a single one stopped to ask if the drenched old woman needed help. How had the world become so cold? After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a sign for a rest stop. My legs were screaming in protest, but I gritted my teeth and pushed forward. The lights of the service plaza were a warm beacon in the stormy night, my only glimmer of hope. I must have been a terrifying sight when I pushed open the door to the convenience store. The young girl behind the counter gasped. "Oh my God, ma'am, what happened to you?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the world went black, and I collapsed on the floor. I awoke on a small cot, covered with a dry blanket. My wet clothes had been replaced. A woman who looked to be in her 50s was sitting beside me. "You're awake," she said, smiling as she handed me a cup of hot water. "You gave us quite a scare. You passed out in the store with a high fever." I struggled to sit up, my body aching all over. "Thank you." "Where am I?" "You're at the highway rest stop." "I'm Brenda, the night manager," she said, helping me adjust my pillow. "We've called for an ambulance, but the rain is making the roads treacherous, so it might be a while." I shook my head. "No, don't worry about it. I'm fine," I said, trying to get up. Brenda gently pushed me back down. "Don't be stubborn. You were out in that storm for who knows how long. You need to get checked out." She hesitated for a moment. "How did you end up walking on the highway by yourself in weather like this?" The tears started flowing again. For some reason, I told this complete stranger everything. When I got to the part about my son slapping me, Brenda gasped. When I told her they had left me on the highway, she slammed her hand on the table in anger, and when I repeated my daughter-in-law's final words, her own eyes grew red. "Bastards," Brenda seethed. "I have a son. If he ever dared to treat me like that, I'd break both his legs." I shook my head with a bitter smile. It was my fault. I shouldn't always be meddling. "Bullshit," Brenda swore. "You're his mother. You have every right to say what you think. They use you when they need you, then kick you to the curb when they don't." I fell silent. She was right. After Leo was born, I had gone from being a mother to being a nuisance, an old woman poisoning their precious son with outdated ideas. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Brenda asked suddenly. I froze. My keys were in my purse, but my purse must have fallen on the highway when Michael threw it out. Go back to them? I shuddered, the image of Jessica's venomous glare flashing in my mind. "I thought so," Brenda sighed. "Look, how about this? When my shift is over, you can come stay with me for a few days, just until you figure things out." I looked at her, my heart filled with gratitude. I couldn't possibly impose. "Don't be silly. We all get old," she said, patting my hand. "My own mom passed away last year. Seeing you, it just reminds me of her." And just like that, I went to live with Brenda. Her husband had passed away years ago, My fever spiked to 103 degrees, and Brenda took time off work to care for me. 3 days later, the fever broke. As I sat on Brenda's small balcony, soaking in the sun, I watched the elderly people below doing Tai Chi, walking their dogs, and playing with their grandchildren. It struck me then that my life had nothing in it besides Michael and his family. Brenda, I've made up my mind. I announced at dinner that night. I'm going to live for myself for once. Brenda put a piece of fish on my plate. What do you mean? I'm 69 years old. I don't have many years left, I said, putting down my chopsticks. All these years, every penny I saved went to my son. I barely touched my own retirement money, always thinking I should leave more for them. Now I see how foolish that was. Brenda nodded. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to travel, I said, the decision surprising even myself. When I was young, I always dreamed of seeing the Southwest, but I never had the chance. Her eyes lit up. That's a wonderful idea. I have a cousin who runs a little bed and breakfast in Santa Fe. I can put you in touch. The next day, I used Brenda's phone to call the county office to get replacements for my ID and senior card. Then I went to the bank to report my savings book as lost. Thankfully, I was the only one who knew the password. A week later, with a temporary ID in hand, I withdrew the $7,000 I had saved over the years. Are you really leaving? Brenda asked on the way to the train station, her voice tinged with sadness. I nodded. You didn't just save my life, Brenda. You saved my soul. She gave me a tight hug. Message me when you get there. As I sat on the train heading towards Santa Fe, watching the landscape rush by, I felt a sense of release I had never experienced before. For 69 years, I had lived for everyone else. My parents, my husband, my son, my grandson. Now, finally, it was my turn to live for me. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, my son Michael was in a state of utter panic. After they had driven for some distance that night, Jessica had suddenly said, "Don't you think that was too much? In this rain?" It was as if Michael had woken from a trance. He slammed on the brakes and spun the car around. What have I done? I must have been crazy. But when they returned to the spot, I was gone. They called the police, who reviewed the traffic cameras. The footage only showed a blurry figure stumbling toward the rest stop before disappearing into the rain. If anything happens to her. Michael's whole body trembled as he gave his statement at the police station. Jessica was terrified too, but she still tried to sound defiant. Well, she should have just kept her mouth. "Shut up!" Michael screamed at her. "That's my mother." In the following days, they printed hundreds of missing person flyers, posted on every social media platform, and even went on a local news program. But they had no idea that the confused elderly woman with mild dementia, who might not remember her address they were looking for, was already on a southbound train, starting a new life. 3 months later, in Santa Fe, I sat on a bench by the duck pond in the city park, watching the birds glide across the water, a smile playing on my lips. These 3 months had been some of the happiest of my life. Brenda's cousin, Carol, treated me like a sister, showing me every charming street and hidden courtyard in the city. I joined a senior tour group and visited the Grand Canyon and Zion National Park. To my great surprise, in a small gallery in Sedona, I met a group of like-minded seniors. We made a pact to become snowbirds and go to Florida together for the winter, a plan we were already discussing enthusiastically in a group text on the smartphone I had just learned to use. I had changed so much. I had a chic new short haircut, bought a stylish floral dress, and learned how to use mobile payments and call an Uber. Carol said I looked at least 10 years younger. Even my chronic high blood pressure had improved significantly. Today was the first weekend after returning to Santa Fe, and I had arranged to meet Carol at the mall to buy some local crafts to send to Brenda. We were in a small shop picking out turquoise jewelry when a familiar voice made me freeze. "Mom?" I turned around slowly. It was Michael. He looked like he had lost a lot of weight, with dark circles under his eyes. He was holding several shopping bags. Beside him stood a shell-shocked Jessica and Leo. "Grandma!" Leo broke free from Jessica's grasp and ran to hug my legs. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt and hugged my grandson tightly. "Leo, you've gotten so tall." Michael rushed over, looking me up and down. "Mom, you." His gaze fell on my new clothes and hairstyle, then to my glowing complexion. He was speechless. Jessica stood a few feet away, her face pale. "Mom, we've been looking for you for 3 months." I stood up, wiped my tears, and said calmly, "I'm fine. You don't need to worry." Suddenly, Michael fell to his knees. Right there, in the middle of the busy mall, he knelt before me. "Mom, I was wrong." He sobbed like a child. That night, I don't know what came over me. I deserved to die. People started to stare and whisper. Carol tactfully led Leo away to look at some pottery. I looked at my kneeling son, and the peace I had cultivated over the past 3 months shattered. The memories of all the nights I had cried myself to sleep came flooding back. "Get up. Don't make a scene," I said softly. He refused. "Mom, please come home with me. These 3 months have been a living hell. The police said you might. You might." He couldn't finish the sentence. Jessica approached, her head bowed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. That day, I was just so impulsive." I looked at the daughter-in-law, who had once cursed me so viciously, and noticed the new lines around her eyes, the dullness in her hair. I realized then that their past 3 months hadn't been easy either. "I'm not going back for now," I said, voicing the decision I had long since made. "I've rented an apartment here in Santa Fe. I've made a lot of friends." Michael looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, you can't forgive me?" I sighed. "I forgive you, Michael, but I can't go back to living the way I did before." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Son, I've had a lot of time to think. After your father passed away, I placed all my hopes on you. That was my mistake. A mother shouldn't stake her entire existence on her child." Michael stared at me, as if he were seeing me for the first time. "I plan to live here for the long term," I continued. "I'll come back to visit Leo sometimes. And you're always welcome to visit me here." Jessica burst into tears. "Mom, we really know we were wrong. Leo asks where Grandma went every single day." At the mention of my grandson, my heart softened. "I'll video call him often," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let's add each other on Facebook." Michael looked at me, expertly navigating my smartphone, his expression a mixture of shock and awe. "Mom, when did you?" I smiled. "Just because you're old doesn't mean you can't learn new things." We exchanged contact information and agreed to a video call the following week. As they were leaving, Michael suddenly asked, "Mom, were you happy these past 3 months?" I looked out the window at the brilliant New Mexico Sunday. "Yes," I said honestly. "Happier than I've ever been." The look in Michael's eyes was a complex cocktail of guilt, shock, and something I had never seen there before: respect. "That's good," he whispered. "Mom, I patted his shoulder. "Go on now, drive safe." Watching my son and his family walk away, I felt a strange sense of calm. At 69 years old, my life was just beginning. Back in my small rented apartment, I set down the bag of gifts and sat in the rocking chair by the window, lost in thought. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a warm patch of light on the floor. 3 months ago, I could never have imagined I would reunite with my son's family this way. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Carol. "You saw your son. How did it go?" I replied, "It was calmer than I expected. They don't look like they've been doing well." Carol's reply came quickly. "Are you softening?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. Was I? When I saw Michael kneeling on that polished mall floor, sobbing his heart out, I did feel a sharp pain in my chest. He was the child I had carried for 9 months, the flesh and blood I had raised. But strangely, apart from that fleeting pang, what I felt more was a sense of release. "No," I finally typed back, "but I did promise to video call with Leo." Putting my phone down, I went to the small kitchen to start dinner. The 1-bedroom apartment, which Carol had helped me find, was small but bright and affordable. I had learned to cook a few simple Southwestern dishes and planned to try my hand at a green child stew I'd had at a restaurant and couldn't stop thinking about. Just as the stew began to simmer, my phone rang. A video call from Michael. My heart skipped a beat. We had said next week, but it had only been 3 days. When I answered, Leo's round face filled the screen. "Grandma!" he shouted excitedly. Daddy told me to call you. My eyes instantly filled with tears. Leo, you're such a good boy. Have you had dinner yet? He pouted. I want to eat Grandma's pot roast. The camera shook, and I saw Michael's hand on Leo's shoulder. He looked even more haggard than he had at the mall, his stubble more pronounced. Mom, his voice was hoarse. Leo wouldn't stop fussing to see you. I adjusted the phone's angle to show the window behind me and the small succulents on the sill. When you come to visit, I'll make it for you, okay? Grandma, why don't you come home? Leo asked innocently. My little bed is still there. The question was a knife in my heart. Off camera, I heard a soft sniffle. It must have been Jessica. Michael's expression tightened. He quickly changed the subject. Mom, it looks really nice where you are, so much brighter than our house. I went along with it. Yes, it faces south, so it gets great Sunday. And see this? It's a woven blanket I bought in Sedona. Doesn't it look nice on the wall? Michael stared at the screen, his gaze complicated. Are you getting used to living alone? It's wonderful, I said with a genuine smile. There's a farmer's market right downstairs and a small park across the street. A lot of seniors do Tai Chi there in the morning. I've started joining them. Mom, Michael started, then stopped. I'll take some time off next week and come get you. It was so matter-of-fact, just like all the times in the past decade, he had come to take me to the doctor, to their house for the holidays, or to stay with them after my husband died, as if I were an accessory to be picked up and dropped off. That's not necessary, I said, my tone gentle but firm. I want to spend the winter here. The winters in Santa Fe are so pleasant, not cold and damp like back home. My firm refusal, something he had never heard from his mother who always just said okay, was met with a stunned silence. After a moment, Jessica's face appeared at the edge of the screen, her eyes red and swollen. Mom, Leo hasn't been eating well lately. The doctor said there's nothing wrong, he's just being picky. I could almost hear the sound of her gritting her teeth, asking for help from the woman she had called an old hag. It must have been incredibly difficult for her. Try a little ginger ale, I said, catching myself giving the kind of old-fashioned advice she despised. I quickly added, but of course, you should listen to the doctor. To my surprise, Jessica didn't argue. Instead, she took out her phone to make a note. How much should I give him? The question astonished me. We talked for a few more minutes about gentle remedies for an upset stomach, and the atmosphere was surprisingly harmonious. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the edge of the table. Mom, what's wrong? Michael asked, his eyes sharp. Nothing, I said, quickly composing myself. My arm is just getting tired from holding the phone. It's time for Leo to go to bed, isn't it? Michael glanced at the time. Oh, it's almost 9. He hesitated. Mom, we really are sorry. It's in the past, I interrupted. Let's video call again on the weekend. Give Leo a kiss for me. After hanging up, I sank into my rocking chair. The dizzy spell was worse than I'd thought. My blood pressure had indeed improved since coming to Santa Fe, but recently I'd been having these sudden moments of vertigo. I had brushed them off as a normal part of getting older. The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. Hello. May I speak with Helen Miller? A young woman's voice asked. This is she. Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a teacher at the Santa Fe Senior Center. Carol recommended you for our spring classes. We're holding registration now, and I was wondering if you might be interested? I had no idea Carol would do something like that. When I was young, I had always wanted to learn watercolor painting, but between work and raising a family, there was never any time. After retiring, I was too busy taking care of Leo. What kind of classes do you offer? I asked, intrigued. We have watercolor, pottery, photography, smartphone basics, and even line dancing and a choir, Linda said enthusiastically. Hearing the word watercolor, my heart beat a little faster. How much is the tuition? It's $100 for the semester, with a senior discount for those over 65. The price was much more reasonable than I had expected. After hanging up, I did some quick math. My monthly retirement check was about $3,200. Rent was $1,500, and living expenses were about $1,000. That left $700. Before, I would have saved every cent for Leo's college fund. To hell with it, I muttered to myself. I would sign up for the watercolor class, and the smartphone class. Even though I knew the basics, I wanted to learn how to book train tickets online and make doctor's appointments. On registration day, I met Arthur. He was 5 years older than me, a retired middle school art teacher who now taught watercolor at the senior center. He wasn't tall, and his hair was mostly white, but he stood up straight and spoke with a gentle, patient voice. "You're from back east, Helen," he said, looking at my registration form. "Yes, I've been in Santa Fe for 3 months now. And do you like it here?" "I love it. The weather is beautiful, and the people are so kind." He smiled. "If you love painting, the mountains and flowers of New Mexico are the perfect subjects." During our first class, Arthur taught us how to hold the brush. When he came to my station, he gently adjusted my fingers. "Not so tight. Relax. Let the brush do the work." His fingers were warm and dry, and for a moment, they reminded me of my late husband teaching me how to write when we were young. The memory brought a lump to my throat. After class, he stopped me. "Helen, have you studied art before? Your wrist is very steady." I was surprised by his perceptiveness, a little when I was young, but I haven't picked up a brush in decades. "I can tell you have a good foundation," he said, handing me a slip of paper. "This is the address for our art studio. We have free practice hours on the weekends. You should come by." I took the paper, feeling a flutter of a long-forgotten excitement. When I got home, I excitedly called Carol to tell her about the class, but I could tell from her voice that something was wrong. "Helen," my cousin called me. "Michael and his family went to the police station to withdraw the missing person report. They said they found you." My heart sank. "Did he contact you?" "Yes," Carol sighed. "Your son kept apologizing, saying he wants to bring you home." "I didn't tell him your exact address, just that you were doing well in Santa Fe." "Thank you." Carol hesitated. "He said you have a specific blood pressure medication at home. He wanted me to remind you to get a refill." That's when I remembered. I was almost out of one of my prescriptions. Could I get it filled here? Would I need to see a new doctor and get all new tests? As I thought about it, that familiar wave of dizziness returned. "Helen, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I'll go to the clinic tomorrow." I sat on the sofa, lost in thought. Was Michael's call to Carol a genuine act of concern? Or was it a way to find out where I was? Could I trust him again? Outside, the Santa Fe night sky was filled with stars. I looked at the clumsy bamboo leaves I had painted in class and suddenly smiled. At 69, I was learning to paint, learning to doubt my son, learning to make decisions for myself. It all felt so surreal, yet so right. During the third watercolor class, Arthur was teaching us how to paint plum blossoms. I was focused on outlining the delicate petals when the world started to spin. The ink on my paper blurred into a dark smudge, and a buzzing filled my ears. "Helen? Helen?" Arthur's voice seemed to come from far away. I tried to answer, but my lips wouldn't move. The next thing I knew, I was falling forward like a sack of flour. When I woke up again, the harsh white light made me squint. The smell of antiseptic told me I was in a hospital. "She's awake," a young female doctor said, leaning over to check my pupils. "Ma'am, do you know where you are?" "The hospital." My voice was raspy. "What happened to me?" "You had a mild stroke. It's a good thing you were brought in so quickly," the doctor said as a nurse adjusted my IV drip. "You have a history of high blood pressure, right? Have you been taking your medication regularly?" It hit me then. I had run out of that specific medication 3 days ago. I had planned to go to the clinic on the weekend. "We tried calling the contact listed as son in your phone, but we couldn't get through," the nurse said. "Does he have a new number?" I remembered that Michael had called me from a new number after we met at the mall, a number I hadn't saved. "There's a friend. Carol," I said weakly. Soon, Carol rushed into the hospital, carrying my insurance card and some toiletries. The doctor said I needed to stay for observation for a week. Carol held my hand. "You silly woman. Why didn't you tell me you were out of your medicine?" I apologized with a weak smile. That afternoon, Arthur arrived with a thermos of porridge. "The class sent me as their representative to check on you," he said, placing the thermos on the table and pulling a stack of cards from his bag. These are get-well wishes from everyone. I opened the top one. In the shaky handwriting of an 80-year-old classmate, it read, "Helen, get well soon. We're waiting for you to teach us how to mix that perfect shade of green." My eyes filled with tears. "I made the porridge myself," Arthur said, opening the thermos. "It's good for your digestion." Carol gave me a knowing look. "Arthur stayed with you all night. He only just went home this morning to change." I looked at Arthur, astonished. The tips of his ears turned slightly red. "It was nothing. You just focus on getting better. I'll come see you tomorrow." After they left, I finally worked up the courage to ask Carol to help me call Michael. "Are you sure?" she asked. "If they know you're in the hospital, they'll—" "I know," I sighed. "But it was a stroke. They have a right to know." Carol dialed the number and briefly explained the situation. I could hear Michael's voice, suddenly sharp and loud, through the phone. "What hospital? Which room? We're on our way." After she hung up, Carol shook her head. "From the sound of it, he's going to drive through the night to get here." I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. In sickness, one craves family. But I was terrified of going back to being a burden. The next morning, the door to my hospital room was thrown open. Michael rushed in, his face covered in stubble, his eyes bloodshot. A haggard-looking Jessica followed him. "Mom!" Michael stumbled toward my bed, wanting to hug me but afraid to touch anything. "How are you? Does it hurt?" His familiar concern brought a lump to my throat. But then I saw Jessica behind him, clutching a fruit basket, her eyes puffy and her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound strong. "It's just a minor thing." A few days of observation. Just then, the doctor came in for his rounds and explained my condition in detail to Michael. I would need to be on medication long-term, have regular checkups, and it would be best if someone were around to keep an eye on me. After the doctor left, he turned to me. "Mom, when you're discharged, you're coming home with us. Jessica already cleared out the south-facing bedroom for you." I looked at Jessica, stunned. She lowered her head. "Mom, we were wrong before. Leo talks about you every single day. The change was so drastic I couldn't process it." The daughter-in-law who had cursed me was now inviting me into her home. I'm fine here in Santa Fe," I stammered. "So fine you end up in the hospital with no one knowing?" Michael's voice rose. Then he quickly lowered it. "Sorry, Mom, I didn't mean—" Jessica tugged on his sleeve and said to me, "Mom, you get some rest. We're going to talk to the doctor." After they left, I heard their muffled argument in the hallway. "What was that about?" "I thought we agreed to respect her decision," Jessica said. "But she's sick. She needs someone to take care of her," Michael practically growled. "And you're going to quit your job to do that? What about the mortgage, the car payments, Leo's school?" There was a long silence. Then I heard Michael's choked voice. "Jessica, she's my mother. When I was a kid, I had a terrible fever, and she carried me for miles in the snow to get to the hospital. Now she's sick. I can't just—" My heart twisted. He remembered. He remembered everything I had done for him. The argument stopped. A little while later, Michael came back into the room alone, his eyes red. "Mom," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. He asked, so carefully, "Do you really not want to come home?" I looked at his exhausted face and suddenly understood. My refusal wasn't punishing them, it was punishing myself. I longed to be close to my son and grandson, but I was terrified of repeating the past. "It's not that I don't want to go back," I said softly. "I just don't want to be your burden." The tears finally fell from Michael's eyes. "Please," he begged, "let me be your son again." His words broke down all my defenses. I reached out and stroked his messy hair, just as I had when he was a feverish little boy. "Okay," I whispered through my own tears. "But on one condition, anything. I need my own space and my own time," I said firmly. "I want to go to my art class twice a week, and I want to see my friends." A smile broke through his tears. "Of course, Mom. You should have your own life." Just then, Jessica returned with the doctor, who explained all the post-discharge instructions, emphasizing my need for a quiet, comfortable living environment. "Mom," Jessica said suddenly, "I was doing some research. It's best for seniors with high blood pressure to live in a south-facing room." We'll move out of the master bedroom when we get back." I stared at her, shocked. The master bedroom was their pride and joy, the one they had decorated perfectly for their wedding. "No, you don't have to." "Yes, we do," Jessica said firmly. "Leo can have the guest room. We'll move into the attic." This was too much. I looked at Michael, who seemed just as surprised as I was. Clearly, this was not something they had discussed. The day before I was discharged, Arthur came to help me with the paperwork. Michael was at the pharmacy, and Jessica was packing my things in the room. "Helen," Arthur said, handing me a paper bag. "This is a local herbal supplement. It's supposed to be good for cardiovascular health." "Thank you for everything, Arthur," I said gratefully. "I'm so sorry I have to drop out of your watercolor class." "Don't worry about it," he smiled. "I have a beginner's textbook for you. You can practice at home." He took a book from his bag, and I saw a slip of paper tucked inside. While Jessica wasn't looking, I glanced at it. It was a phone number, and the words, "Call anytime." My heart beat a little faster. Michael returned from the pharmacy and paused when he saw Arthur. "This is Arthur, my watercolor teacher," I explained. "This is my son, Michael." The two men shook hands. I noticed Michael sizing Arthur up, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Mom mentions you often," Michael said. Arthur smiled. "She told me you won an award for a drawing you did as a child." Michael looked at me, surprised. "You still remember that?" "Of course," I said softly. "The picture you drew, my mom, is still in the old photo album." Michael's eyes reddened again. He turned to Arthur. "Thank you for taking care of my mother. She means the world to me." On the day we left Santa Fe, both Carol and Arthur came to see me off. Carol pressed a huge bag of local specialties into my hands. "Call any time you want to come back," she said. Arthur handed me a rolled-up scroll. "A small gift. You can open it on the way." In the car, I carefully unrolled the scroll. It was a beautiful ink wash painting of a single plum blossom with a line of calligraphy that read, "Blooming alone in the cold." Tears fell onto the rice paper. "Mom, that Arthur fellow," Michael said, looking at me in the rear-view mirror. "He's just a teacher," I said quickly, then realized how defensive I sounded. "A very nice, patient teacher." Jessica turned around and gave me a long, meaningful look, but said nothing. As the car sped down the highway, the scenery blurring past, I thought about how, just 3 months ago, I was abandoned on a road just like this, soaked and hopeless. Now, I was sitting in my son's car, carrying gifts from new friends, returning to the home that had once hurt me so deeply. Life was a strange, winding road. I looked out the window and noticed the wildflowers blooming brightly on the roadside. As we pulled into our familiar neighborhood, my heart began to pound. 3 months ago, I had left this place in shame. Now, what role was I returning to? "We're here, Mom," Michael said, turning off the car. "Wait here, I'll carry you upstairs." "No need," I said with a smile. "The doctor said a little activity is good for my recovery." The elevator ride up was awkward. Leo clung to my hand as if he were afraid I might vanish again. Jessica stared at the floor numbers, and Michael kept wringing his hands. The apartment door opened, and I gasped. The heavy, dark curtains were gone, replaced with light, airy ones, just like in my Santa Fe apartment. On the coffee table was a blooming orchid, next to the woven placemat I had bought in Sedona. "Your room is this way," Michael said, leading me to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, I nearly cried. It was a near-perfect replica of my little home in Santa Fe. The same beige bedding, the same rocking chair, even a few succulents on the windowsill. The walls were decorated with enlarged, framed photos of the landscapes I had taken on my trip. I was too choked up to speak. "It was Jessica's idea," Michael said softly. "She said you loved your place in Santa Fe, and we wanted you to feel at home." Jessica stood in the doorway, twisting her fingers. "I hope it's to your liking. All the furniture is new." I took her hand. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Leo bounced into the room. "Mommy and Daddy worked on it for days. They wouldn't let me see." Dinner was takeout, but I noticed Jessica had made me a special bowl of porridge, very similar to the one Arthur had brought me. The small gesture warmed my heart. After dinner, Leo insisted I tell him a story. I sat in the rocking chair with him curled in my lap, telling him about my adventures in the Southwest. "Grandma, do the mountains really look like they're painted?" he asked, his eyes wide. "They really do." Grandma saw them with her own eyes. I pulled out my phone to show him pictures. The sound of Jessica washing dishes in the kitchen stopped. She came quietly to the doorway to listen. When I described the 3 stages of a traditional tea ceremony I'd read about, Michael put down his phone and drew closer. "The first cup is bitter, representing the struggles of youth. The second is sweet, for the successes of middle age. And the third has a complex aftertaste, like the wisdom of old age," I explained. "Like life," Michael said suddenly. We all looked at him, surprised by the philosophical thought from my usually practical son. "You're right, Michael," I said, smiling at him. I saw something different in his eyes, a new depth, a kind of peace. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in my familiar home, I sent a message to Carol. "Arrived safely." They decorated my room just like my place in Santa Fe. She replied instantly, "That's thoughtful of them. Arthur says hello." At the mention of his name, a warmth spread through my chest. I opened the scroll he had given me and read the inscription again. At the bottom, in tiny characters, was another line. "The winter plum, tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." The next morning, I woke at my usual 6 o'clock and found Jessica already in the kitchen. "Mom, you're up so early," she said, surprised. "If you need anything, just tell me." "It's a habit," I smiled. "I went for a walk every morning in Santa Fe." Jessica hesitated. "Well, I could walk with you in the community garden. Leo is still asleep." I was touched by the offer. The morning air was crisp and clean. We walked side by side on the tree-lined path, a comfortable silence between us. "Mom," Jessica began, "I am so sorry." I patted her hand. "It's all in the past." "No," she said, shaking her head as tears streamed down her face. "You don't know how much I regret what I said that day. I stopped and gently hugged her. I was at fault too. I was too stubborn. I thought about it every day for 3 months," she sobbed, "wondering if something terrible had happened to you. Leo kept asking if he was the reason you left. My heart ached. Silly boy. It had nothing to do with him." When we got back, Michael was up, clumsily trying to make breakfast. He looked visibly relieved to see us return together. "Mom, what are your plans for today?" he asked at the table. "I was thinking of going to the community center," I said. "I learned some new line dances in Santa Fe. I could teach the ladies here." Michael and Jessica exchanged a look. "I'll drive you." "No need," I said with a smile. "Do you remember where my bus pass is?" Michael stared at me for a moment, then jumped up and started rummaging through a drawer. "Here it is. You still remember how to use it?" "Of course," I said, taking the card. "After your father passed, this card was my companion for 3 years." The ladies at the community center were thrilled to see me. They gathered around as I shared stories of my travels and taught them a few new dance steps. The center's director even invited me to lead a performance at next week's community event. On the way home, I stopped by the pharmacy to refill my prescription and picked up some herbs at the market. I had overheard Jessica telling Michael that Leo was being a picky eater again. That evening, just as I predicted, Leo pushed his food around his plate. Jessica sighed in frustration, but this time, instead of scolding him, she tried to patiently coax him. I quietly went to the kitchen, brewed a mild herbal tea, and placed it on the table. Jessica looked at it, then poured a small cup for Leo. Surprisingly, after a few sips, his appetite seemed to improve. "Mom?" Jessica whispered. "Thank you." In this way, I slowly reintegrated into the family, but on entirely new terms. I was no longer the timid, meddling mother-in-law, but a woman with her own life. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I taught dance at the community center. Every evening from 7 to 8 was my designated painting time. Michael had bought me a complete set of watercolor supplies. On weekends, I would cook pot roast for Leo. Jessica no longer objected, only asking that I use less salt and butter. One day, Michael came home from work early and heard me on a video call in my room. "Arthur, I'm still having trouble with this wash technique. Relax your wrist a bit more, came Arthur's gentle voice from the tablet's speaker. That's it. You're making wonderful progress, Helen. Michael stood outside the door, his expression unreadable. At dinner, he asked casually, Mom, you and that Mr. Arthur keep in touch often? We have a video lesson once a week, I answered honestly. I can't just give up on my painting. Jessica's chopsticks paused midair, but she said nothing. Late that night, I got up for a glass of water and heard them talking softly in the living room. She's at her age. What could possibly happen? Jessica was saying. That's not what I mean, Michael sighed. It's just, these 3 months in Santa Fe, she's like a different person. A better person, don't you think? Jessica replied softly. She's happier, healthier. She has so many friends, and she's even more forgiving with us. Michael's voice was laced with confusion, but sometimes I feel like she doesn't need me anymore. Hearing that, I quietly retreated to my room. My son's words were both heartbreaking and affirming. He was finally learning that love isn't about control, but about letting go. The next day, I offered to teach Michael and Jessica how to paint. Leo joined in the fun, and soon our family was gathered around the coffee table, learning to paint little chicks. Mom, what made you want to learn this? Michael asked, awkwardly holding the brush. I always wanted to learn when I was young, I said, adjusting his grip. But there was never time between work, taking care of your father, and running the house. Jessica looked up. And now? Now, I said, looking at them both, it's time to live for myself. Michael's eyes grew red. He looked down, and a single tear fell onto the paper, blooming like an unexpected little flower. Life settled into a rhythm that was smoother than I expected, though not entirely without its bumps. I maintained my schedule of going to the community center on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, spending the rest of my time at home. This new routine was difficult for Michael to accept at first. Mom, isn't today Thursday? He asked one rainy morning as he saw me putting on my shoes. Yes, it is. The choir has rehearsal, I said, tying my rain boots. But, he hesitated. Jessica has to work late, and I was hoping you could pick up Leo from preschool. I paused. What time does he get out? 4 o'clock. I calculated the time. Rehearsal ends at 3. That's plenty of time. Michael looked relieved, but also a little embarrassed. Or, I could just leave work early. I looked him straight in the eye. Michael, I am capable of managing my own schedule. If I need your help, I will ask for it, okay? He blinked, then nodded. We had this type of conversation often over the next few months. His instinct was to manage my life, and my new instinct was to draw a clear boundary. The rain had stopped by the time I got to the preschool. Leo shot out of the classroom like a little cannonball. Grandma, look at the dinosaur I drew. The teacher said it looks like a chicken. He chattered on for a moment before his face fell, and then I pushed him. He looked down at his shoes. The teacher said she needs to talk to my parents. Sure enough, the teacher gently suggested that Leo's parents needed to work with him on his emotional regulation. On the way home, Leo was quiet and sullen. At dinner, when Jessica heard he had gotten into a fight, her first reaction was to scold him. How could you push someone? Haven't I taught you to use your words? Leo's lip began to tremble. I interjected softly. Jessica, can I tell a story? She looked at me, confused, but nodded. In a faraway land, I began, putting down my fork. There was a little tiger cub who was always teasing the other animals. One day, he made fun of the little deer's legs, saying they looked like twigs, and he even kicked a little rabbit. Leo's eyes were wide with attention. And what happened? Well, the wise old owl told the tiger cub that every creature in the forest is special. The deer's legs would heal, and the rabbit's fur would grow back, but the hurt in their hearts might leave a scar forever. Did the tiger cub say sorry? Leo asked. He did. And he also learned to use his eyes to see the beauty in others, I said, stroking his hair. For example, maybe the other boy's drawing had really wonderful colors. Leo thought for a moment. He drew a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was purple. It was pretty cool. Jessica stared at me, a flash of admiration in her eyes. Later that night, as I passed their slightly ajar bedroom door, I heard her say to Michael, "The way your mom tells stories, it works so much better than my lectures." Michael chuckled softly. "I told you. She raised me without ever laying a hand on me." There was an unspoken question hanging in the air between them. "So how did you become a son who would lay a hand on her?" After a long pause, Michael whispered, "Work was so stressful. The mortgage. You were always saying she was spoiling Leo. I forgot how she raised me." My heart clenched, and I quietly walked away. That weekend, Michael suggested a family trip to a new nature preserve. Leo was ecstatic, and Jessica even took the day off. Watching them bustle around, packing a picnic, I thought of Arthur, who had mentioned he'd always wanted to see the fall colors up north. On a whim, I sent him a text message, inviting him to visit if he was ever in the area. I regretted it instantly. What was I thinking? Inviting an outsider to a family gathering? To my surprise, he replied almost immediately, "I would be honored." As it happens, I have a trip planned to the State Museum next week to see an exhibition. Perhaps I could arrive a day early. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. How would I tell Michael and Jessica? What would they think? As I was debating what to do, Michael walked over holding my pill organizer. "Mom, your blood pressure medicine is running low. I put some cash in here for you to get a refill." I opened the case. Tucked inside were 5 crisp $100 bills. On each, written in pencil, were the words, "For treats." A lump formed in my throat. When he was a little boy and our budget was tight, I would give him pocket money with the same notes scribbled in the corner. Now, the roles were reversed. "Michael," I began hesitantly, "next Saturday, a friend of mine would like to come over for dinner. Is it Carol?" "She's more than welcome," he said, not looking up from the picnic basket. "No, it's Arthur. He's coming to town for an exhibit." Michael's movements froze. He slowly looked up. "Just him?" "Yes," I said, suddenly feeling like a child who had done something wrong. "If it's not convenient, it's convenient. Of course it's convenient." His voice was a little too loud. "Any friend of yours is a friend of ours." But his face clearly said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jessica came over to see what the commotion was. "Mom's friend, Mr. Arthur, is coming for dinner next week," Michael said, almost through gritted teeth. Jessica raised an eyebrow, then surprised me by saying, "Oh, that's wonderful. I've been meaning to ask him for some advice. Leo's school is having an art fair, and I want to help him with a project." Michael whipped his head around to stare at his wife, his eyes full of disbelief. The atmosphere in the car, on the way to the preserve, was a little tense. Michael drove aggressively, braking sharply several times. Jessica, on the other hand, was unusually chatty, trying to fill the silence. Leo, oblivious in the back seat, pointed out everything he saw. "Grandma, look, a giant pinwheel," he shouted, pointing to a distant hill where a row of white wind turbines spun slowly in the autumn Sunday. "They're beautiful," I said. "They look a bit like the ones in your photos from Sedona, don't they?" Jessica asked. I was surprised she remembered. "A little," I said, "but the ones in Sedona are closer to the red rocks." Michael glanced at me in the rearview mirror but said nothing. At the preserve, Leo ran wild like a colt let out to pasture. We followed behind, admiring the golden ginkgo trees and fiery red maples. "Mom, let me take a picture of you," Jessica suggested. "The red leaves here are different from the ones in Santa Fe." I stood under a maple tree, looking at my daughter-in-law behind the lens. 3 months ago, this woman had cursed me. Now, she wanted to take my picture. Life was truly strange. Michael walked over quietly and stood behind her, looking at the phone screen. Just as Jessica pressed the shutter button, he reached out and put his arm around my shoulder. In the photo, my expression shifts from surprise to a soft smile. Michael's gaze is tender and complex. The background is a blaze of crimson leaves. When we got home, Michael hid on the balcony to smoke a cigarette. He had quit 5 years ago. His behavior worried me. "I'll go check on him," I said to Jessica. She shook her head. "Let me. You should rest." Through the glass door, I saw them arguing. Michael looked agitated, while Jessica remained calm. Finally, he slumped into a chair, and she gently rubbed his back. At dinner, Michael made a sudden announcement. "Jessica and I were talking. From now on, Sundays will be our official family day. The rest of the week, everyone is free to do their own thing. And for the day your friend visits, I'll do the cooking." The concession was so abrupt that I looked at Jessica, who gave me a subtle wink. That evening, I got a video call from Arthur to show me a painting he was working on. "This is based on the landscape you described from your hometown," he said, holding up an unfinished canvas. We spent a half-hour discussing brush strokes, completely unaware that my bedroom door had been quietly pushed open, then closed again. The next morning at breakfast, Michael had dark circles under his eyes. "Mom, you and Mr. Arthur were talking pretty late last night." "Oh, did we disturb you?" I asked, feeling guilty. "No, not at all," he said, then added, "He seems to admire you a lot." Jessica kicked him under the table. I put down my chopsticks, deciding it was time to be direct. "Arthur is a very good friend. He taught me to appreciate beauty again." I chose my words carefully. "Just like Santa Fe taught me to be independent." Michael's hand trembled, spilling porridge on the table. "I'm sorry," he said, frantically wiping it up. "Michael," I said softly, "you will always be my son. That will never change." He froze, tears welling in his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I'm just scared." "Scared of what?" I asked gently. "Scared that you don't need me anymore," the tall, grown man confessed, his voice breaking like a child's. Jessica quietly took Leo from the table. I walked around and hugged my son's head to my chest. "Silly boy," I murmured. A mother's need for her child never ends. It just changes. After Leo left, the atmosphere in the house subtly shifted. Michael no longer showed anxiety about my social activities, and Jessica often sought my advice on parenting. We seemed to have found a new equilibrium. That weekend, I packed a small bag for a reunion at the senior center in Santa Fe, organized by Carol to celebrate its anniversary. "How many days will you be gone?" Michael asked, leaning against the doorframe. 3 or 4. "Is Arthur going to be there?" "Yes, he's a guest of honor." Michael was silent for a moment. "Mom, are you happy?" The question made me pause and reflect. "Yes," I said. "I am. I have you. I have my friends. I have my own life. I feel very fulfilled." He nodded, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "For treats." I opened it and gasped. It was a plane ticket. "Michael, this is too expensive. You're worth it," he smiled. "You've taught me so much, including how to be a better son." The night before I left, Jessica gave me a new smartphone stand. "This will make it easier to video chat. Leo can see you whenever he misses you." I hugged her. "Thank you for everything." The next day, Michael's family took me to the station. Leo clung to my leg. "Grandma, take lots of pictures of the big mountains for me." I kissed his cheek. Michael put my suitcase on the train. "Mom, have a great time," he said. "If you miss us, just call. I'll come get you. Not come home soon, but have a great time." His words brought tears to my eyes. As the train pulled away, I watched the 3 of them waving on the platform and understood. Home wasn't a cage, it was a harbor. A place you could always sail from and always return to. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Arthur. "See you tomorrow. I look forward to hearing your new stories." I smiled and replied, "I have so many to share." Outside the window, the world rushed by. At 69, I was writing the freest chapter of my life. I had roots, and I also had wings. The Santa Fe sun streamed through the hotel window. I stretched and checked my phone. 8 in the morning. The reunion at the senior center started at 10. Carol had booked a hotel for me close to the venue, so we old gals could chat all night, as she put it. I had 3 unread messages. The first was from Michael. "Mom, did you get there okay? Leo drew a picture for you." Attached was a colorful, wobbly drawing of a person labeled Grandma. I smiled, saved the picture, and replied, "Tell Leo his drawing is much better than Grandma's." The second was from Jessica. "Mom, don't forget your medicine. The temperature changes a lot in Santa Fe, so dress warmly." This level of concern was unimaginable 3 months ago. I texted back my thanks and promised to bring them some local cookies. The third was from Arthur. "See you at the center. I have a surprise for you." It was followed by a smiley face emoji. My heart did a little flip, a reaction I quickly told myself was inappropriate. As I washed my face, the person in the mirror seemed like a stranger. Her hair was short and stylish, her complexion rosy, even the wrinkles around her eyes seemed softer. Was this really the same woman who had been left to die in a rainstorm, filled with despair? The reunion was in the senior center's main hall. The moment I walked in, Carol rushed over to hug me. "Helen, I've missed you so much." Behind her were 24 of my former classmates, all beaming. Surprise! Arthur stepped out from the crowd, holding a beautifully mounted scroll. "This is for you." He unrolled it to reveal a stunning, intricate painting of a peony, with the inscription, "Tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." "Arthur," I whispered, my fingers lightly touching the petals, "this is too much." "Not nearly as precious as the painting of the city park you gave me," he said with a smile, referring to the clumsy, amateurish piece I had insisted on giving him before I left. Carol nudged me. "He stayed up for nights finishing that, you know." "Nonsense," Arthur said, his ears turning red. "Don't listen to her, Helen." Amid the laughter, a sharp pain shot through my chest, radiating down my left arm. The room went dark, and the scroll slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. "Helen! Helen!" A chorus of voices exploded around me, but all I could see was Arthur's face, wide with terror. Then, the world went black. When I woke, the familiar smell of antiseptic told me I was back in the hospital. A young doctor was checking the monitors. "She's awake," he said, leaning over. "Ma'am, do you know where you are?" "The hospital." My voice was a rough whisper. "What happened?" "You had a heart attack. It's a good thing you were brought to the ER so quickly," he said, adjusting my IV. "We'll need to do an angiogram and possibly put in a stent. Is your family here?" "Family." The word made my throat ache. I shakily reached for my phone on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. "Here it is," Arthur said from the doorway. He rushed to my bedside and handed me the phone. "Carol is taking care of the paperwork. I brought all your things." The doctor looked from him to me. "And you are?" "A friend," Arthur answered quickly, though his ears were red again. I took the phone, my son's contact name staring back at me, a painful reminder of that night on the highway. Was I now, once again, the needy mother calling for help? My thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before I finally pressed it. "Mom," Michael's voice was cheerful. "Are you having fun at the reunion?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's wonderful. I'm just at the hospital for a routine checkup." The doctor suggested an angiogram. There was a sudden silence on the other end, followed by muffled sounds, and then Jessica's voice. "Mom, which hospital are you at?" "We're coming right now." "No, don't be silly," I said weakly. "Leo has school." "Mom," Michael's voice was suddenly stern. "Tell me the truth. What happened?" It was the same tone he used when I tried to hide a fever from him as a child. A mother knows her son, and a son knows his mother. "It's my heart," I finally admitted. "It's serious." Less than 10 minutes after I hung up, Carol rushed into the room. "Helen, Michael said he's driving through the night to get here. He told me to tell you not to be afraid, that he's got everything under control." His words, relayed through a friend, made the tears I'd been holding back finally fall. The same son who had abandoned me in the rain was now racing through the night to save me. The procedure was scheduled for the next morning. Arthur insisted on staying the night, no matter how much I protested. Late that night, the pain returned, sharp and terrifying. I curled into a ball, biting my lip to keep from crying out. "Helen," Arthur noticed immediately. He took my hand. "Is it bad?" I nodded, cold sweat drenching my hospital gown. He pressed the call button for the nurse and, with his other hand, began applying gentle pressure to a point on my wrist. "Breathe with me, Helen." Slowly, after a nurse gave me a painkiller, just before I drifted off, I heard Arthur tell the doctor, "Her son will be here in the morning. She's a very strong woman. She never likes to show her weakness." His words made me think of when Michael was little and sick, how I would stay up all night sponging him down, then pretend to be full of energy for work the next day. He had seen my strength. He understood. When I opened my eyes again, it wasn't Arthur sitting by my bed, but Michael, his face haggard and his eyes bloodshot. "Michael," I whispered, unable to believe he was there. So fast. "Did you speed?" He managed a weak, raspy smile. "Got 3 tickets. It was worth it." I noticed his suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. I took the earliest flight. He squeezed my hand. "Mom, the doctors told me everything. You need the angiogram and maybe a stent. They need a family member to sign the consent forms." I looked at his exhausted face and realized that in the eyes of the law, I was now an old woman who needed her son's permission to be treated. The thought made my throat tighten. "I'm sorry to trouble you," I whispered. Michael's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Mom, don't ever say that." Before the procedure, the doctor explained all the risks. Michael listened intently, asking sharp, intelligent questions, like the engineer he wasn't. When it came time to sign the forms, his hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. "Don't be scared," I found myself comforting him. "It's a minor procedure." He forced a smile. "I know. My mom is the bravest person I know." The angiogram revealed a severe blockage. As they wheeled me into the operating room, I saw Michael at the end of the hall on the phone, his back rigid with tension. The surgery was a success. When I was back in my room, Jessica and Leo were there. Leo ran to my bed, but Jessica quickly pulled him back. "Gently, Grandma's sore." "I'm not sore," I smiled weakly. "Come here, let Grandma see you." Jessica's eyes were red, her usual perfect makeup slightly smudged. "Mom, you scared us to death." Michael stood behind her, holding a stack of papers. "It's all taken care of," he said. "A private room, the best cardiologist in the hospital." That evening, Jessica took Leo to a hotel to rest, and Michael insisted on staying the night. I woke up thirsty in the middle of the night and saw him sitting in the chair by the window, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "Michael?" He jumped, quickly wiping his face. "Mom, do you need something?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, pouring me a glass of water. "Go back to sleep." But I could see the tear tracks on his cheeks. I insisted, and finally he broke down. I almost lost you again," he sobbed, kneeling by my bed. "That night, when I left you in the rain. What's the difference between me and my father?" The words hit me like lightning. My husband, his father, had been a man with a violent temper, especially when he drank. When Michael was 10, he had watched his father slap me across the face. He had launched himself at the man, biting his hand, and had been beaten for it. That night, holding my bruised and battered son, I had sworn I would leave him. "Michael," I said, my voice trembling as I stroked his hair, "you are nothing like your father." "How am I different?" he cried, looking up at me with a pain I had never seen before. "I hit you too. I became the monster." So that was it. For 30 years, he had lived in the shadow of his father's abuse. I forced myself to sit up, ignoring the ache in my chest, and pulled him into a tight hug. "Listen to me. That night, after you left, you came back looking for me, didn't you? Your father never would have." He wept in my arms, a 38-year-old man crying like a lost child. I just held him, patting his back, just like I did when he had nightmares as a little boy. The next afternoon, Arthur arrived with his thermos. He stopped short when he saw Michael, then politely introduced himself. "Mr. Arthur," Michael said, surprising me by extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you. Thank you for taking care of my mother." "It was my duty as a friend," Arthur said, a little flustered. "I made some soup. It's good for the heart." As he served the soup, I noticed Michael watching him, and I suddenly asked Arthur, "Weren't you a doctor before you retired?" "A middle school art teacher," Arthur replied with a smile. "Healthy cooking is just a hobby." Over the next few days, Arthur visited daily, each time with a different healthy meal and a hand-drawn get-well card. Michael's attitude toward him slowly shifted from suspicion to respect. He even started asking Arthur for advice on diet and nutrition. On the 5th day, I woke from a nap to find Arthur standing by my bed, gently brushing a stray piece of hair from my forehead. At that exact moment, Michael walked in carrying a bag of fruit. The two men froze, staring at each other. Arthur quickly pulled his hand back. I just came to drop off some soup." Michael walked into the room silently, set down the fruit, and said, "Thank you for everything you've done for my mom." After Arthur left, Michael sat by the bed, peeling an apple. "Mom," he said casually, "Mr. Arthur seems like a nice man." My heart skipped a beat. "But," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "at your age, you need to be careful with new friends. Your heart can't take too much excitement." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What are you talking about?" He grinned, scratching his head. "Okay, forget I said anything." The next afternoon, Jessica came to relieve Michael. She insisted on helping me with a sponge bath. This was the same daughter-in-law who used to subtly complain about my old people smell, now carefully and gently washing my arms and back. Her fingers paused on a faint scar on my lower back. "This is from when I had Michael," I explained. "He was a breech birth. I needed a C-section." Jessica's hand trembled. "The scar is so long." "The surgical techniques weren't as good back then," I said lightly. "You women have it so easy now, with epidurals and everything." Suddenly, she started to cry, her tears falling onto my back. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never knew." I turned and took her hand. "It's all in the past." The day before I was discharged, the doctor gave us a long list of instructions. Michael diligently typed everything into his phone while Jessica was on her phone with our local clinic, arranging for follow-up care. "Mom," Michael said after the doctor left, "Jessica and I have been talking. When you get back?" I tensed, afraid he would insist I move in with them. "We rented a small, ground-floor apartment with a little yard for you, just a 5-minute walk from our place." He smiled. "You'll have space for a garden, and Leo can come visit you right after school." The arrangement was so unexpectedly perfect, so thoughtful. It gave me both independence and support. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. On the drive home, Michael drove with extreme care, constantly checking on me in the rearview mirror. Jessica kept turning around to ask if I was warm enough, if I needed a drink. Leo sat beside me, chattering away about preschool. The sun streamed through the windows, warm and comforting. I thought of the inscription on Arthur's painting. "Tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." Maybe that's what life was. You had to go through the storms to truly appreciate the bloom. The small apartment was, in fact, a beautifully furnished 2-bedroom unit in a lovely senior living community right next to their neighborhood. The ground floor unit opened onto a small patio with a table, chairs, and several large flower pots. "The clinic is right across the street," Jessica said, helping me inside. "And there's a grocery store and pharmacy on site." The apartment was filled with light, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto a small garden. The bedroom was simple, with a single bed, a small desk, and the framed photos from my trip hanging on the wall. "Do you like it?" Michael asked anxiously, setting down my bags. "We tried to match the style of your place in Santa Fe." I looked around, my throat tight. "I love it. But it must be so expensive." Michael and Jessica exchanged a smile. "Mom," Michael said, "we didn't rent it. We bought it." "You bought it?" I nearly fell over. "How could you? You have a mortgage." "I got a promotion last year," he said. "And besides, Jessica and I owed you this." "Please, Mom, just relax and enjoy it," Jessica added. "We've arranged for a cleaning service to come twice a week, and you can either eat at the community dining hall or cook for yourself." I sank onto the sofa, speechless. This was more than I could have ever dreamed of. It was independence, but without the loneliness. "What about Leo?" I asked. "He'll be here right after school," Jessica laughed. "He was our project supervisor for decorating this place. He insisted that you needed a dinosaur pencil holder on your desk." The image of my grandson, diligently placing a T-Rex on my desk, made me smile. After I was settled, Michael took me to the community clinic. A kind, middle-aged doctor reviewed my medical history and gave me an emergency alert bracelet. "If you feel any discomfort, just press this red button. Someone is on call 24 hours a day," she explained to Michael, who took notes on everything. He even asked questions I hadn't thought of, like whether I could still do line dancing or have an occasional glass of red wine. On the way back, I asked him, "Michael, how do you know so much about cardiac care?" Pushing my wheelchair, he answered quietly, "I've done a lot of reading these past 3 months." I realized then that he had been preparing for this day ever since I had disappeared. As promised, Leo burst through the door the moment he got out of school. "Grandma, where's my dinosaur pencil holder?" he yelled, running to the desk. Satisfied that it was in its proper place, he pulled a small paper packet from his backpack. "For you, Daddy and I got them." I opened it. Inside were a few sunflower seeds. "The teacher said if we plant them now, they'll bloom in the summer," Leo explained excitedly. "They'll be even taller than me." Holding the tiny seeds, I thought of the towering golden sunflowers in Arthur's garden in Santa Fe, always facing the Sunday. "Let's plant them tomorrow, shall we?" I said, pulling Leo into a hug. That evening, Michael and Jessica insisted on having our first family dinner in my new home. Jessica brought over a few simple, healthy dishes, and Michael produced a bottle of red wine. "The doctor said a little is good for the heart," he announced proudly, pouring me a small glass. As we raised our glasses, Michael's voice cracked. "Welcome home, Mom." Those 3 words unleashed a torrent of tears. This wasn't a return to their home. This was a return to my own home. My new life began. Every morning at 7, Leo would arrive like a little alarm clock to walk with me to his bus stop. Afterwards, I would do my exercises in my little yard and water my sunflower seeds. I quickly made friends with the other residents, many of whom had similar living arrangements. We started a morning exercise group, a choir, and a book club. The vibrant community reminded me of my time in Santa Fe. One day, while unpacking, I found the set of paints and the unfinished canvas Arthur had given me. After some hesitation, I gave him a video call. "Helen," he said, his face lighting up the screen. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," I said, showing him my little yard. "Look, I'm about to plant sunflowers." We chatted for a while, and he told me that everyone at the senior center missed me. Before we hung up, he said, "I've put together a portable art kit for you, for painting outdoors. I'll mail it to you." I started to refuse, but the words that came out were, "Thank you, Arthur." The package arrived 3 days later. Inside the beautiful art kit was a small card, "For when you've recovered, we'll paint together again. The sunflowers of Santa Fe miss you. A." I tucked the card into the bottom of my pill organizer like a schoolgirl hiding a love letter. The next day, Michael came by with soup and saw me organizing my medication. His eyes fell on the hastily closed pill box, then to my flushed cheeks. He smiled knowingly. "Did you get a package from Mr. Arthur?" I nodded, embarrassed. "That's nice," he said, surprising me. "It's good to have people who care about you." Then he went about serving the soup as if nothing had happened, leaving me stunned. As my strength returned, I began to paint again. At first, it was just random images, but soon a theme emerged. The storm, the taillights on the highway, the warm glow of the rest stop. I called the series The Stormy Night. The first time Michael saw them, he stood before the easel for a long time without speaking. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "is this how you saw it that night?" I realized then that the paintings were from my perspective, a perspective he had never considered. "It's in the past," I said lightly. "Painting is just part of my therapy." In May, my Stormy Night series was accepted into the city's senior art exhibition. To my surprise, one of the paintings won the award for Most Emotionally Resonant. Michael took the day off work to bring the whole family to the award ceremony. "My grandma is a famous artist," Leo proudly announced to everyone. One of the judges told a reporter, "Her work has a power that goes straight to the heart. That resilience, that search for hope in the midst of despair, is deeply moving." After the exhibit, Michael quietly bought the painting and hung it in the most prominent spot in their living room. One day in June, Jessica rushed over with Leo. He had gotten into another fight at school. "This is the second time," she said, furious. "He needs to be punished." Leo sat in the corner, his face a mask of stubbornness. "Why did you fight?" I asked him gently. He said, I don't have a grandma," Leo sniffled. "He said my grandma was dead." My heart ached. I hadn't realized my disappearance had left such a deep scar. "Jessica," I said, leading her to the kitchen, "do you remember the story I told about the little tiger cub?" She looked at me, and a wave of understanding crossed her face. "You mean?" I nodded. Sometimes, a story is more powerful than a punishment. That night, I heard Jessica in Leo's room, telling him a new story about a little fawn who was misunderstood, her voice gentle and firm. In July, my sunflowers bloomed, their golden heads towering over Leo, just as he had predicted. I sent a picture to Arthur, who replied, "The sunflowers in Santa Fe are blooming too. I hope they can meet someday." Michael saw me smiling at my phone. "What did Mr. Arthur say, Mom?" he teased. "He said you should mind your own business," I retorted, playfully swatting at him. He dodged, laughing like a boy. As summer drew to a close, we had a barbecue in my little yard. Afterwards, I brought out a folder. "There's something I want to talk to you about," I said, trying to sound casual. "This is my will and my final arrangements." The beer can in Michael's hand nearly slipped. "Mom, why are you talking about this? At my age, these things need to be taken care of," I said calmly. "I've put both of your names on the deed to this apartment. My savings are to be divided 3 ways, between the 2 of you and Leo. My insurance policy is in the nightstand drawer. The password is Leo's birthday. And, if something happens to me, please let Carol and Arthur in Santa Fe know." Michael's eyes were red, but he didn't have an outburst like he would have in the past. He took a deep breath and accepted the folder. "Mom, we respect your wishes, but you have to promise us you'll take care of yourself and live to be 100. 101? Leo piped in, making us all laugh. Late that night, after Jessica and a sleepy Leo had gone home, Michael stayed to help me clean up. "Mom," he said suddenly, "thank you for giving us a chance to make things right." I stopped what I was doing and looked at my son, who now stood a full head taller than me. "And thank you, Michael," I said, "for giving me the chance to be myself again." In the moonlight, we smiled at each other, and all the pain and resentment of the past melted away into a quiet understanding. The gentle October sun warmed my small yard. The sunflowers had gone to seed, their heavy heads drooping. I sat on the stone bench, watching Leo concentrate on his drawing pad. It was his first official art lesson with me. "Grandma, look at my son." He held up his drawing of a wobbly yellow circle. "It's wonderful," I said, stroking his hair. "You know, my first drawing was a sun, too." "Did your mommy teach you how to draw?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. My mother, a woman from the countryside who had never held a paintbrush, had taught me how to roll dumpling wrappers, how to mend clothes, how to find joy in a life of scarcity, but not how to draw. "No, sweetie. My mother taught me other things," I said softly, "like how to make dumplings." "Then you can teach me how to make dumplings." His eyes lit up. "Okay, this weekend, when your mom and dad come over, we'll all make them together." Just then, the yard gate opened, and Michael walked in carrying a large box. "Mom, Leo, look what I've got." Leo dropped his drawing pad and ran over. "Cake. I smell cake." "You've got a good nose," Michael laughed, setting the box down. "Mom, your birthday is tomorrow. Jessica ordered a cake for the party, but this one is for you. We can put it in your fridge." I had completely forgotten. Tomorrow was October 18th, my 70th birthday. A year ago, I was lying awake in their guest room, listening to them argue about how I was spoiling Leo. "You shouldn't have," I said automatically. "Yes, we should have," Michael said, crouching down to my level. "Mom, 70 is a big one, and Jessica has invited all your friends." He gave me a mischievous wink, including Mr. Arthur. My heart fluttered. He's coming?" "Yes. He's flying in from Santa Fe," Michael said softly. "Are you happy, Mom?" I looked into my son's caring eyes and understood. This was his way of making up for that night in the rain. "I'm happy," I said, patting his hand. "But what makes me happiest is seeing the man you've become." Michael's eyes reddened. He pretended to fuss with the cake box. "Leo, can you help Daddy take this inside?" After Leo had triumphantly carried the box indoors, Michael took a piece of paper from his briefcase. "Mom, I found something. I was hoping I could read it at your party tomorrow." It was a yellowed page from a diary, the edges soft with age, covered in a child's scrawling handwriting. "My mom. Remember?" Michael asked softly. "I wrote it when I was 10. It won an award. You kept it in the photo album all these years." I made a copy. I took the paper, and an image flashed in my mind. a small boy, running home, waving a certificate in the air. That was before his father's drinking started, when our small family was poor but full of hope. Tomorrow, Michael's voice choked, I want to read it in front of everyone, so they all know what a wonderful mother I have. I pulled him into a hug. He no longer smelled of rain and anger, but of a quiet strength. The next day, Jessica showed up with a makeup artist. I laughed, but she insisted. Mom, you have such beautiful skin, the makeup artist said. Jessica, who used to mock my old-fashioned beauty remedies, now smiled and said, My mom has always taken great care of herself, haven't you, Mom? We looked at each other and smiled. The restaurant was a beautiful, traditional-style building. When we walked in, I was stunned. The main hall was filled with more than a dozen tables, bustling with people. There were my friends from the dance class and the community center, Michael's colleagues, Jessica's friends, and even Carol, who had flown in from Santa Fe and was waving at me. Helen, over here, she called. I walked over and saw she was sitting next to Arthur. He stood up, looking especially handsome in a dark blue suit. Arthur, I said, at a loss for words. He handed me a long brocade box. Happy birthday, Helen. A small token. I opened it. Inside was an exquisite paintbrush, the handle engraved with a phrase, At 70, following the heart's desire. This is too precious, I murmured. Not as precious as your paintings, he said with a warm smile. After a few toasts, Michael tapped his glass for attention. Today is my mother's 70th birthday, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I'd like to read something I wrote when I was 10 years old. He pulled the copied page from his pocket. My mom is the best mom in the world. She wakes up very early to make me breakfast. When I'm asleep, she is still mending my clothes. Once, I had a high fever, and my mom carried me to the hospital. She fell down on the way, but she held me tight so I wouldn't get hurt. Michael's voice broke. Jessica went to his side and took his hand. My mom's hands are rough, but they feel so gentle. My mom says you should be like bamboo, straight on the outside, but hollow on the inside, upright and humble. When I grow up, I will make sure my mom has a good life, so she never has to work so hard again. The room was silent. Many of the older guests were dabbing their eyes. After the last line, Michael was weeping openly. He walked over to me and knelt down. Mom, I failed you. I made you suffer. I pulled him up, my own tears flowing. Silly boy. I was never angry with you. Jessica came over and gave me a deep bow. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so immature. I wrapped one arm around my son and the other around my daughter-in-law. Leo ran up and hugged my legs. 3 generations, crying and laughing together as the room erupted in applause. After the party, as guests were leaving, Arthur approached me. Helen, could we speak for a moment? We walked out to the hotel garden. Helen, he began, taking a deep breath. I came here not just to celebrate your birthday, but to ask you a question. My heart sped up. I knew what was coming. Would you be willing to spend the rest of your years with me? Not as a student, but as a partner. This confident, articulate man was now as nervous as a schoolboy. I looked at the garden around me, my mind racing. A year ago, I was a pathetic old woman, abandoned in the rain. Now, I had my own home, my own life, and the possibility of love. Arthur, I said finally, my voice soft, I cherish our friendship more than you know, but my roots are here now, with Leo and Michael. The light in his eyes dimmed for a second, but then returned. I understand, he said. Can we still be friends? Of course, I said, taking his hand. You will always be my best teacher and my dearest friend. On the drive home, Michael watched me in the rearview mirror. Mom, what did Mr. Arthur want to talk about? I smiled. He invited me to go painting in Santa Fe. Michael was quiet for a moment. And what do you think? I told him I might visit sometime, I said, looking out the window. But my home is here. The only home I need is where you all are. In the mirror, I saw my son's face break into a smile of pure relief. Life settled back into its peaceful, fulfilling rhythm. In early November, my Stormy Night series was featured in a citywide art exhibition, and a local paper wrote an article about me titled, An Artist Reborn. Michael proudly framed the article and kept it on his desk at work. Arthur and I continued our weekly video calls, and sometimes Michael would even join in, asking for advice on what kind of art supplies to buy for me. On the first weekend of December, the whole family gathered in my small yard to make dumplings. Leo's creations were lopsided, but everyone praised his efforts. Jessica, whom I had recently taught, now expertly pinched the edges. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, "the city's senior college is opening a new branch at the community center. Mr. Arthur recommended you as a guest lecturer." "Me? A lecturer?" I said, dropping a dumpling. "Yes, to teach introductory watercolor," Michael smiled. "He said you were his most talented student." I looked at Jessica, who nodded enthusiastically. "You should do it, Mom. It's only 2 classes a week. I can pick up Leo." And so, I became Professor Helen. My students were all my age, and our classes were filled with as much laughter as art. For Christmas, Michael gave me a large, mysterious gift. It was a professional easel and a gold-embossed certificate of membership to the National Senior Artists Association. "You deserve a bigger stage, Mom," he said proudly. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. In my little yard, the seeds for next year's sunflowers lay sleeping under the earth. I looked at my son's mature, kind face and thought of his twisted, angry expression on that stormy night. It felt like a lifetime ago. Wounds heal. Misunderstandings fade. As long as there is love, even the coldest winter will eventually give way to spring. "Michael," I said, patting his hand, "the proudest accomplishment of my life is having a son like you." He hugged me tightly, just like he did when he was a little boy. "Grandma, look at the dumpling I made." Leo ran over, holding up a lopsided creation. I took the small dumpling, which held the hopes of 3 generations, and placed it gently on the tray. "It's perfect," I said. "Let's go cook them." As the steam rose from the pot, I could almost see next summer's golden sunflowers blooming in the yard, and my grandson, my little Leo, sitting among them, painting his first perfect flower. "Mom, from now on, the cooking and laundry are all on you." I was sitting in the sunroom, sipping a cup of Earl Grey, enjoying the first morning of my retirement without having to rush off to work. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, landing on my teacup and making the amber liquid glow. At 62 years old, after a 38-year career as a teacher, I thought I could finally take a breath. Suddenly, a greasy dish rag flew through the air and landed in my lap, staining my favorite beige cardigan. "Besides, you're retired now," my daughter-in-law, Jessica, announced, standing in the middle of the living room with her hands on her hips. Her chemically curled hair was pulled back into a high, tight ponytail. "You're just sitting around the house doing nothing anyway. You cannot just live here for free." I slowly set down my teacup, my fingers trembling slightly. The rag smelled of acrid grease, probably from just wiping down the kitchen stovetop. "Jess, what kind of way is that to talk to my mom?" "My son, Daniel," said as he walked out of the bedroom, his suit crisp and his tie perfectly knotted. A flicker of warmth sparked in my chest, but it was extinguished just as quickly when he continued, "Mom's getting older. You have to be a little more delicate." He walked over and stood before me, looking down at me with that familiar, impatient smile. "Mom, your Social Security check is only so much, and with the cost of living these days, Jessica and I are under a lot of pressure. It's only right that you help out with the chores around the house, don't you think?" I looked up at the son I had raised. When he had a fever as a child, I stayed up with him for 3 days and 3 nights straight. When he went to college, I scrimped and saved to buy him a laptop. When he got married, I gave him my entire life savings for the down payment on this house. And now, he stood before me, his eyes as cold and indifferent as if he were looking at a stranger renting a room. "I understand," I said softly. I placed the dish rag on the table, stood up, and brushed off my cardigan. "You two go on to work. I'll take care of things here." Jessica let out a triumphant little hum and walked out, grabbing her purse on the way. Daniel hurried after her, but paused at the door to add, "Mom, remember to mop the floors too. Jessica likes things really clean." The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the empty living room. I stood there, looking around the house I had lived in for 2 years, which was really just a small bedroom they had granted me. On the wall still hung a family portrait I'd brought with me. In the photo, Daniel was just an elementary school kid, his arms wrapped around my neck, grinning from ear to ear. I walked into the kitchen. The sink was piled high with dirty breakfast dishes, the stovetop was splattered with grease, and the trash can was overflowing. I rolled up my sleeves and started washing the dishes. As the water ran from the faucet, my tears started to fall, hot and silent. Before I retired, I'd always helped with cooking and cleaning after getting home from work. Even though Jessica constantly criticized my food for being too salty or too bland, or complained that I hadn't mopped the floors well enough. But I never imagined that on the very first day of my retirement, they would so blatantly treat me like an unpaid maid. After washing the dishes, I did not mop the floor. I went back to my small room and pulled a suitcase out from under the bed. It was an old suitcase, one my husband Arthur and I had bought on a trip to Florida years ago. He's been gone for 5 years now. I wonder how much his heart would ache if he could see this. I slowly packed my things: clothes, photo albums, a few of my favorite books, the watch Arthur had left me. I did not have much. It all fit into one suitcase. Finally, I took an envelope from under my pillow. Inside was the cash from my pension checks that I had been secretly setting aside for months. It was not a lot, but it was enough to get me settled somewhere for a little while. I left a note on the dining table. "I'm going to find my own worth. Don't worry about me." Then I dragged my suitcase and walked out of that place they called home. At the entrance of the subdivision, I hailed a cab. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked cheerfully. I froze for a second. Where to? After Arthur died, I sold our old house and moved in with my son. Now I had nowhere to go, just. "Take me downtown," I said. Through the car window, familiar sights passed by. The elementary school where I had taught, the farmer's market I frequented, the old coffee shop Arthur had loved. This city held the memories of most of my life, yet now I felt like a homeless wanderer. I checked into a hotel downtown. The room was small but clean. After setting down my suitcase, I sat by the window, watching the bustling crowds below. A sudden sense of relief washed over me. From a hidden compartment in my suitcase, I pulled out a large manila envelope. Inside was a collection of documents: property deeds, stock certificates, bank statements. I looked through them one by one, my fingers tracing over the numbers and official seals. Before Arthur passed, he had held my hand and said, "Eleanor, never put all your eggs in one basket. Daniel is a good son, but people change. You have to have something for yourself, a safety net." At the time, I thought he was just being anxious because of his illness. Daniel was the boy I raised. He had always been so considerate and obedient. How could he ever be anything but loyal? But now, I understood my husband's wisdom. These documents proved that I owned a 2-bedroom condo in the Southgate neighborhood, which I had bought 5 years ago with the money from Arthur's life insurance. It was currently being rented out. I also owned a small commercial space on the outskirts of town, leased to a convenience store, and I had several stable mutual funds that provided a steady monthly income. All told, it was more than enough for me to live a comfortable life in my later years, without ever needing to depend on my son's charity. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of an old friend. "Hello, Brenda? It's me, Eleanor." My voice was surprisingly calm. "I've moved out." "Yes, from Daniel's house." No, it was not an impulsive decision. I should have listened to Arthur a long time ago. Brenda was my husband's former colleague, and now worked at a law firm. After hearing what had happened that morning, she cursed into the phone. "Those ungrateful brats." "Eleanor, don't you worry. I'll help you sort out the housing situation right now. The lease on your Southgate condo is up next week. You can move right in." "Thank you, Brenda," I said softly. "Just don't tell Daniel yet. I want them to sweat a little." After hanging up, I took a long, hot shower and changed into a fresh set of clothes. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. There was a resolve in her eyes I had not seen in a very long time. I was 62 years old. Perhaps my life was just beginning. That evening, I went down to the hotel restaurant for dinner. I had just ordered when my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom, Where did you go? His voice was tinged with an uncharacteristic urgency. Why is the house so clean? What did you mean by that note? I slowly cut into the steak on my plate, my voice even. I'm staying somewhere else for a few days. You two will have to take care of yourselves. Mom, stop being dramatic, Daniel's voice rose. Jessica came home, saw how clean the kitchen was, and thought you were throwing a tantrum. Just come back, okay? You don't have to do all the housework. How about that? I could almost picture his expression on the other end of the line, not worried, but annoyed. Annoyed at my nerve, annoyed that he might actually have to cook his own dinner and wash his own dishes. Daniel, I said, putting down my knife and fork. I am 62 years old. I raised you for 35 years. I put you through college and helped you buy your house. I am not your unpaid maid. Mom, what are you talking about? He said, flustered. We just asked you to help out a little. Is it really necessary to make such a big deal out of it? Where are you? I'll come pick you up. That will not be necessary. I hung up the phone and turned it off. The steak was delicious. I savored every bite and then ordered a slice of tiramisu for dessert. As it arrived, a family counseling show was playing on the restaurant's television. I watched the mother and son arguing on the screen and suddenly smiled. Tomorrow, I would go see my empty condo. It was time to start a brand new life. Right now, Daniel and Jessica were probably realizing I was not joking, that I had truly left. I wondered what they would do for dinner. There was still some of the casserole I made yesterday in the fridge, but would they know how to heat it up? I shook my head, pushing aside the pointless worry. From now on, I had to learn to think of myself first, just as Arthur had told me to. The hotel bed was comfortable, and for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. There was no waking up in the middle of the night to heat up a late meal for my son. No being jolted awake at dawn by the sound of my daughter-in-law's high heels. I slept until morning. A sliver of sunlight pierced through the gap in the curtains, heralding the start of my new day. The hotel's white ceiling and soft mattress were a stark reminder that I had left the home where I was treated like a servant. My phone showed 7 missed calls, all from Daniel. There were also 3 text messages. Mom, stop this. Come home. Jessica is really angry. You're making things very difficult for us. Where are you? I did not reply. Instead, I called Brenda. Eleanor, are you okay? Brenda's voice was full of concern. I'm wonderful, I said, pulling open the curtains and letting the sunlight flood the room. Brenda, I'd like to go see my condo. I was just about to call you about that, Brenda said quickly. I got in touch with the tenants. They've agreed to move out 3 days early. You can go over and take a look right now. I have the key. Half an hour later, I met her outside her law office. I had not seen Brenda in 5 years, but she had hardly changed, save for a few fine lines around her eyes and the fact that her short hair was now dyed a fashionable shade of green. She wrapped me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. Come on, I'll drive you, she said, leading me to her little red sedan. Sunnyvale Gardens was the name of the condominium complex in Southgate where my 2-bedroom unit was located. I had bought it 5 years ago, right after Arthur passed away and Daniel had just gotten married. On a whim, I had followed my late husband's advice and used his life insurance and my savings to buy this place, and I had been renting it out ever since. It's this one, 502, Brenda said, taking out the key and leading me upstairs. When the door opened, a faint scent of lemon cleaner greeted us. The tenants, a young couple, had kept the place immaculate. The walls were a soft beige, the floors a light-colored wood. Sunlight poured in through the sliding glass doors, making the whole apartment feel bright and warm. They just moved out this morning and had a cleaning service come through, Brenda said. They left the furniture, so you can move right in. I slowly walked into this unfamiliar home, my fingers brushing across the smooth dining table and the brand-new sofa. The master bedroom had a queen-sized bed, and the second bedroom had been converted into a home office. The kitchen was fully equipped. The balcony overlooked the complex's central garden, offering a wide, open view. Do you like it? Brenda asked, leaning against the doorframe. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. This place was more than twice the size of my small room at Daniel's house. It was filled with light, and it was all mine. The rent has been deposited into your account on time every month, Brenda said, pulling a folder from her briefcase. After property taxes and management fees, you've been clearing about $1,500 a month. Here are the financial statements for the past 5 years. I took the folder but did not open it. Brenda was my husband's most trusted colleague, and now she was the only friend I could truly rely on. There's no need. I trust you, I said, looking around. I'm moving in today. So soon? Brenda raised an eyebrow. Aren't you going to wait for Daniel to come crawling back with an apology? He won't, I said with a bitter smile. In his eyes, I'm just a stubborn old woman throwing a tantrum. Brenda sighed and pulled out her phone. All right, I'll call a moving company for you. There's no need for that. It's just one suitcase, I said, shaking my head. Nothing else matters. Brenda drove me back to the hotel to get my luggage. On the way, she asked suddenly, Eleanor, when are you going to tell Daniel the truth? What truth? The truth that you have your own property and savings, that you don't need to depend on him, Brenda said, tapping the steering wheel. That boy probably thinks you're penniless and that you'll come crawling back to him in a few days. I watched the streetlights blur past the window and did not answer. She was right. Daniel had probably never imagined that his compliant, hard-working mother actually had more than enough to live independently. Back at the hotel, I packed my single bag and checked out at the front desk. Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Hello? I answered hesitantly. Mom? It was Daniel's voice, thick with anger. Why haven't you been answering my calls? Do you have any idea how worried Jessica and I have been? I'm fine. You don't need to worry, I said calmly. Where are you? I'm coming to get you now, he said, his tone demanding, like he was ordering around a disobedient child. That's not necessary, I said, glancing at Brenda beside me. I'm staying with a friend for a few days. What friend? You have other friends in this city? Daniel's voice was full of suspicion. Mom, stop this nonsense and come home. Jessica said, if you come back, you can do less housework. I closed my eyes, a tightness in my chest. In his mind, did I not even have the right to have friends of my own? Daniel, I interrupted. I am 62 years old, and I have a right to my own life. You and Jessica just take care of yourselves. Mom? You? I hung up and turned off my phone. Brenda looked at me with concern. Are you okay? I'm fine. I managed a weak smile. Let's go. Let's go home. The word home, coming from my own lips, felt strangely foreign. For 38 years, my home had always shifted according to the needs of my husband and son, from a school dormitory to company-provided housing, and finally to that small room in Daniel's house. And now, at last, I had a space that was entirely my own. The property manager at Sunnyvale Gardens was a pleasant, middle-aged man. When he learned I was the owner, he warmly helped me with the move-in paperwork. Brenda helped me buy some groceries and daily necessities, staying until evening. Call me any time, she said before she left. And don't go soft on him. Let that boy learn a lesson. After she left, I stood in the empty living room, a feeling of unreality washing over me. Yesterday at this time, I was washing dishes in Daniel's kitchen. Now, I had a fresh start. I opened my suitcase and hung my few items of clothing in the closet. At the bottom was an old photo album filled with pictures of Daniel from childhood to adulthood. I gently caressed the yellowed photos, and memories flooded back. His first steps, his first day of school, his college graduation. Back then, his eyes were still filled with love and gratitude for his mother. The last page of the album held a family portrait taken a month before Arthur died. He was painfully thin in the photo but insisted on standing, one arm around my shoulder, the other on Daniel's. He looked directly at the camera, as if to say, "Take care of yourself, Eleanor." I carefully took the photo out and placed it on the nightstand. Then, from the hidden compartment of my suitcase, I took out the manila envelope and spread the documents on the bed. The property deed clearly had my name on it, dated 3 months after Arthur's passing. 3 mutual fund contracts totaling over $680,000 with steady monthly returns, and a commercial lease agreement with an annual rent of $48,000. Combined with my pension, My fixed monthly income was close to $15,000, more than 3 times what Daniel thought I had. I let out a long breath and locked the documents in the desk drawer in the office. Arthur was right. You always have to have a safety net. That night, I cooked a simple bowl of soup for myself and sat by the sliding glass door to eat. The city lights began to sparkle, and the traffic flowed like a river of light. My phone remained off. I did not want Daniel's calls to disturb this rare moment of peace. After a shower, I lay down in the unfamiliar but comfortable bed, tossing and turning. My mind was filled with images of Daniel as a child. The nights I stayed up with him when he had a fever, the evenings I helped him study for exams, the money I saved from my own expenses each month when he was in college. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, startling me. I had forgotten to turn it off completely, only putting it on silent. A text from Daniel appeared on the screen. "Mom, Jessica is pregnant. Are you really going to let your grandchild be born without a grandmother?" I stared at the message, my fingers trembling slightly. Pregnant? What a coincidence. The day after I left, I did not reply. Instead, I called Brenda. "Brenda, can you check on something for me?" The morning sun streamed into the bedroom. I opened my eyes, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar room, the comfortable bed, and the complete freedom of my time. I stretched, then slowly got out of bed. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of coffee and 2 slices of toast. Sitting on the balcony, I watched the elderly neighbors doing their morning exercises and the younger residents walking their dogs. A long-forgotten sense of freedom washed over me. My phone had 3 unread messages, all from Daniel. "Mom, Jessica is really pregnant. It's been 2 months. If you don't believe me, here's the report from the doctor. Don't you want to meet your grandchild?" I clicked on the image. It was a blurry ultrasound photo. I could faintly make out the words "early intrauterine pregnancy." The date was from yesterday, the very day I had left. What a coincidence. I put down my phone and took a sip of coffee. The bitter liquid cleared my head. If Jessica were really pregnant, why would she have been screaming at me yesterday morning, throwing a dish rag, and demanding I do chores? Aren't pregnant women supposed to avoid stress? The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Brenda standing outside, holding a bag of breakfast. "Morning," she said, bustling in and placing a container of oatmeal and a pastry on the table. "Figured you wouldn't have eaten properly." "What brings you here?" I asked, taking the warm oatmeal. "2 things," Brenda said, pulling a folder from her bag. "First, I checked Jessica's medical records. She did go to the women's health clinic yesterday, but the diagnosis was an irregular period. She's not pregnant at all." My hand shook, spilling some oatmeal on the table. Even though I had suspected it, the truth still sent a chill through my heart. They had fabricated a pregnancy just to trick me into coming back to be their maid. "Second thing," Brenda said, handing me a business card. "I've made an appointment for you with a lawyer for 3 o'clock this afternoon. There are some details about Arthur's estate that need to be confirmed." "His estate? I thought that was all taken care of," I said, confused. Brenda's expression suddenly became complicated. "Eleanor, there were some things Arthur didn't tell you before he passed. This lawyer will explain everything." A knot formed in my stomach. My husband had been a mid-level manager at a bank. He made a good living, but we were not wealthy. Besides this condo and our savings, what other estate could there be? After Brenda left, I cleaned up and decided to go for a walk to explore the neighborhood. Just as I was putting on my shoes, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was the young man from property management, holding a large bouquet of flowers. "Miss Vance, this was just delivered for you." I took the bouquet. Tucked inside was a card. "Mom, we're sorry. We were wrong. Please give us a chance to make it up to you. Daniel and Jessica." The flowers were lilies and carnations, my favorites when I was younger. I was a little surprised Daniel remembered. But Jessica's signature on the card was sloppy and crooked, clearly written by Daniel himself. I placed the flowers on the coffee table without looking for a vase. Before heading out, I hesitated, then grabbed my phone and turned it off. The area around the condo complex was well equipped, with a supermarket, a farmer's market, and a pharmacy all within walking distance. I sat down at a small coffee shop and ordered a latte. Two young women at the next table were chatting. My mother-in-law is always telling me what to do, it's so annoying. I know, right? Older people should just stay out of it and let young people live their lives. I shook my head with a bitter smile. In Daniel and Jessica's eyes, I was probably that meddling mother-in-law. But in reality, for the past 2 years, I had never even entered their bedroom without an invitation, terrified of being accused of prying. Halfway through my coffee, my phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Vance, this is Kevin, Daniel's colleague. Daniel didn't come to work today. He said he's looking for you. He's very worried. Could you please give him a call? I sighed and turned my phone on. Immediately, a dozen notifications for missed calls and texts flooded in. I scanned a few. Mom, where are you? I'm really worried. Mom, Jessica knows she was wrong. She's willing to apologize. Mom, I've called the police. Called the police? My heart skipped a beat. Though I knew it was just a threat, if this really escalated to involving the authorities, it would be bad for everyone. I dialed Daniel's number. Mom? He answered instantly, his voice sounding on the verge of tears. Where are you? I've been looking for you all day. I'm fine. I'm staying at a friend's house, I said calmly. Which friend? Give me the address. I'll come get you, he said urgently. That's not necessary. I need some time to myself. Mom? His voice suddenly rose. Have you been scammed by someone? Your pension is so small. Where could you afford to stay? Was it that Brenda who put you up to this? She never liked me. I closed my eyes, the tightness returning to my chest. In his mind, I was just a clueless old woman, with no judgment, liable to be scammed out of my meager pension at any moment. Daniel, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I am 62 years old. I am capable of deciding where I go. You and Jessica just take care of yourselves. Mom, you can't do this, he was practically shouting now. I'm your son, your only family. How can you just abandon me? Abandon you? I laughed bitterly. Daniel, you and Jessica were the ones who started treating me like a maid. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Jessica's sharp voice came through. Mom, it was my fault. I'm young and foolish. Please don't hold it against me. Please come back. Daniel and I can't live without you. This sudden apology stunned me. Jessica had always been so arrogant. I had never heard her speak so humbly. Is Jessica really pregnant? I asked softly. Of course it's true, she said eagerly. I was just so excited after the checkup yesterday. I wasn't thinking straight. Mom, you're going to be a grandmother. Please come home. I gripped the phone, remembering the real diagnosis Brenda had found. They were still lying. I need to think about it, I said, then hung up and turned off my phone again. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I arrived at the law firm Brenda had recommended. The lawyer who met me, a Mr. Peterson, was in his 50s, with gold-rimmed glasses and a calm, deliberate way of speaking. Mrs. Vance, he said, adjusting his glasses. Regarding the estate of your late husband, Mr. Arthur Vance, there are some details you need to be aware of. He took a document from a file. This is a trust fund Mr. Vance established before his passing. The beneficiaries are you and your son, Daniel. However, there is a special clause. If Daniel is found to be unfilial or neglectful towards you, you have the right to revoke his beneficiary status. I took the document, stunned. A trust fund? Arthur had never mentioned it. How much is in this fund? My voice trembled. Its current value is approximately $500,000, Mr. Peterson said. It generates about $2,000 in monthly income, which should be directly deposited into your account. But strangely, it appears you've never touched this money in the past 5 years. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. $500,000? $2,000 a month? I had never received a penny. That's impossible. I scanned the document and suddenly noticed a detail. The receiving account number. It was not my bank account. Mr. Peterson leaned in. You're right, it's not. This was a temporary account designated by Mr. Vance. It was supposed to have been transferred to your name 5 years ago. My fingers started to shake. After Arthur died, Daniel handled all the financial paperwork. He had said he wanted to help me with all the complicated matters, and I, trusting him completely, gave him power of attorney. Mr. Peterson, my voice was hoarse. Can you check who the current holder of this account is? Of course, but I'll need your authorization. I immediately signed the form. Mr. Peterson made a call to the bank. 10 minutes later, he had an answer. The current user of the account is… He hesitated for a moment. Daniel Vance. I collapsed into the chair, the world going dark around me. So that was it. Daniel had been secretly pocketing the $500,000 trust fund my husband left for me, all while letting me believe we were struggling, forcing me to rely on his charity. Mrs. Vance, are you all right? Mr. Peterson asked with concern. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Mr. Peterson, I want to sue Daniel Vance and get that money back. Well, he said, looking uncomfortable, it is a family matter. I would advise trying to resolve it through mediation first. Mediation? I laughed coldly. He stole his own mother's retirement money, left to her by his father. What is there to mediate? Leaving the law firm, I stood on the street, the sunlight stinging my eyes. For 5 years, Daniel had been quietly taking $2,000 a month, while I lived on my meager pension, eventually becoming his unpaid maid. I dialed Brenda's number, my voice shaking. Brenda, Daniel. He stole the $500,000 Arthur left for me. When Brenda burst into my condo, I was sitting on the balcony, staring into space. My husband's trust fund, Daniel's 5 years of deceit, Jessica's fake pregnancy, the information churned in my mind, making it hard to breathe. Eleanor, Brenda said, pulling me into a hug. Don't be scared. I'm here. Her light perfume reminded me of when Arthur died. She had held me just like this, promising to take care of me. Who could have imagined the deepest cut would come from the son I trusted most? Brenda carefully reviewed the documents from Mr. Peterson, her expression growing darker. This Daniel, he looks so innocent, but he's this corrupt. $500,000, and he didn't give you a single cent. Not only that, I said with a bitter laugh. He made me think the family was broke, that I had to depend on him to survive. Let's go, Brenda said, standing up abruptly. We're going to the bank right now to track where this money went. With Brenda by my side, we went to the bank that managed the trust. After presenting the necessary documents, the manager pulled up the account's transaction history. For the past 5 years, on the 15th of every month, exactly $1,800 had been withdrawn. The signature on the withdrawal slips is Daniel Vance's, the manager said, pointing at the screen. He used the power of attorney you granted him. I trembled. I had signed that document shortly after Arthur's death to facilitate handling the estate. I never imagined Daniel would use it to steal from me. Can you freeze this account? Brenda asked. We'll need a court order for that, the manager said apologetically. Leaving the bank, Brenda immediately contacted a judge she knew. He advised us to first send a formal letter from a lawyer demanding Daniel return the funds. If he refused, we could proceed with legal action. That's too slow, Brenda fumed, stomping her foot. A monster like that should be arrested immediately. Brenda, I said, taking her hand, I want to talk to him first. Talk about what? He's been lying to you for 5 years. I just want to hear what he has to say, I said quietly. After all, he's the son I raised. Brenda sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed. Back home, I turned on my phone and sent Daniel a text. Meet me tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, at the entrance to the Sunnyvale Gardens complex. Come alone. He replied almost instantly. Mom, you finally answered. Sunnyvale Gardens? You're living there? The rent there is really expensive. I did not answer his question. I just sent back, don't tell Jessica, and turned my phone off. That night, I tossed and turned. My mind filled with images of Daniel through the years. The first time he called me Mama, the smile on his face when he ran home with an award, the words of thanks he gave me at his wedding. These memories clashed with his current betrayal, tearing my heart to pieces. The next morning, I woke early, made a strong cup of tea, and sat on the balcony, waiting. At 9:30, I went downstairs to the entrance of the complex. Daniel was already there, wearing the dark blue shirt I had bought him last year. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and he hurried over. "Mom, you live here?" He looked me up and down. "This place is expensive." "Where did you get the money for rent?" "I'm not renting," I said calmly. "This is my condo." "Your condo?" His eyes widened. "Since when do you have a condo?" "I bought it 5 years ago, with the money from your father's life insurance," I said, staring directly into his eyes. "Right after you helped me take care of the trust fund." His face paled instantly, and his eyes darted away. "What? What trust fund?" "Daniel," I said, using his full name. "The $500,000 your father left for me. You've been pocketing it for 5 years, taking out nearly $2,000 every month while I scraped by on a meager pension. And now you want to trick me into coming back to be your unpaid maid?" His face went from white to red, then to a sickly pale. "Mom, listen to me. I can explain." "Explain what?" My voice shook. "Explain how you could stand by and watch your mother pinch every penny while you secretly stole her money. Explain how you had the nerve to work me to the bone without a single word of truth." "It was Jessica," he blurted out, grabbing my hand. "She forced me. She said we should invest the money to buy a bigger house for our future. Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." I pulled my hand back, looking coldly at the son I was once so proud of. A man in his 30s, and the first thing he does when he's caught is blame someone else. "Give me back the money, Daniel," I said, trying to stay calm. "All of it." I don't have that much right now," he stammered. "Most of it's been invested. I can't get it out right away." "Invested? Invested where?" In Jessica's cousin's project." His voice grew quieter. "It has a 20% annual return." I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. 20% annual return. It was a classic Ponzi scheme. My $500,000 was probably gone, squandered by them. "Daniel," I said, fighting back tears, "I'm giving you 1 week. Either you return the money, or I'll see you in court." "Mom, you can't," he said, panicking. "I'm your son. Would you really watch me go to jail?" "Jail?" I laughed coldly. "When you were stealing the money, did you ever stop to think you might go to jail? That money was supposed to be mine anyway," he suddenly yelled. "Dad left it for me. Why should you get all of it? I'm a beneficiary too." I took a step back, unable to believe my ears. This was the son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. For money, he could betray his own mother. "The trust document is very clear." My voice was ice. "You only inherit under the condition that you are a good son to me. As of now, you won't get a single penny." With that, I turned and walked away. Daniel shouted from behind me, "Mom, you'll regret this. Who do you think you are? A retired old woman. Without me, you'll get sick and die all alone, and no one will ever know." I did not look back. I just walked straight into my building. The security guard at the front desk looked at me with concern. "Miss Vance, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine." I managed a weak smile. "From now on, please don't let that man in." Back in my apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, the tears finally breaking through. Brenda was right. Some people are not worth forgiving. The phone rang. It was Mr. Peterson. "Mrs. Vance," his voice was serious. "I've uncovered some new information. Your husband's trust originally stipulated that Daniel could only inherit 30%, and only if he met 3 conditions. First, with your consent. Second, after he was married and financially stable. And third, if he was a filial son to you. And now, 5 years ago, Daniel altered the documents, changing his share to 50% and forging your signature." Mr. Peterson paused. "That constitutes a felony." I gripped the phone, a heavy weight on my chest. Daniel not only stole the money, but he also forged documents. My son. When did he become this person? "Mr. Peterson." I took a deep breath. "I've made my decision. We're filing the lawsuit." After hanging up, I stood by the window, watching the children playing in the garden below. Once upon a time, Daniel was that innocent. What changed him? Was it Jessica's influence? The lure of money? Or was it my own overly doting upbringing? My phone rang again. It was Jessica. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom?" she sobbed. You can't do this to Daniel. He's your only son. How could you bear to see him go to prison? Jessica, I said calmly, when you two were lying to me, did you ever think about this day? We were wrong. We really know we were wrong, she choked out. The money, it's been invested. We can't get it back right now. But we can sign an IOU. We'll pay you back as soon as we make a profit. What investment? Tell me clearly. It's my cousin's medical project, she stammered. It's very profitable, 20% a year. I scoffed. Jessica, you're a college-educated woman. You believe in a scam like that? There was a pause on the other end, and then Jessica's voice changed. The crying stopped, replaced by a threatening tone. Mom, don't push us. If this really goes to court, we'll just say the money was a gift from you. You're just an old woman. Who's going to believe you? I was shaking with rage. Jessica, I have all the documents, the bank statements. So what? She sneered. It's a family dispute. The most a judge will do is order mediation. But you, who's going to take care of you when you get sick and old? A nursing home? I hung up and turned off my phone. This couple, one playing the victim, the other making direct threats. A match made in heaven. That evening, Brenda came over with ingredients for lasagna. When I told her what happened, she was so angry she nearly dropped the dish. That despicable pair, she seethed. Eleanor, we're going to the courthouse tomorrow. I'll pull some strings. Get this case seen as soon as possible. Brenda, I said, stirring the sauce. I'm wondering if I should give them one more chance. What? Brenda's eyes widened. Are you crazy? They stole $500,000 from you. They threatened you. But he's still my son. My voice cracked. He was such a good boy when he was little. The first thing he'd do after school was his homework. Eleanor, Brenda said, grabbing my shoulders. Wake up. That good little boy is gone. The Daniel that exists now is a complete and utter monster. I lowered my head, tears dripping into the pot. She was right. The son I remembered no longer existed. The Daniel of today had nothing in his eyes but money, without even a shred of basic decency. Tomorrow, I said, wiping my tears. We'll go to the courthouse. The hallways of the courthouse were cold and long. I sat on a bench, with Brenda and Mr. Peterson beside me. Today, we were submitting the official complaint against Daniel, demanding the return of the entire trust fund plus 5 years of interest. Nervous? Brenda asked, taking my cold hand. I shook my head, but my eyes kept darting towards the entrance. Would Daniel show up? I had Mr. Peterson notify him of today's proceedings. At precisely 9 o'clock, Daniel and Jessica rushed in. Daniel was in a suit, looking like he was attending a business meeting. Jessica was wearing a loose-fitting dress, her abdomen slightly rounded. This time, it seemed she might actually be pregnant. Mom, Daniel said, walking over quickly, a fake smile plastered on his face. Whatever it is, let's talk about it at home. Why do we need to make a scene at the courthouse? I looked at his hypocritical expression and felt a wave of nausea. This was the son I once would have given my life for, now standing before me like a calculating stranger. Mr. Vance, Mr. Peterson said, stepping between us. On behalf of Mrs. Vance, we are formally suing you today for the misappropriation of trust fund assets. Here is a copy of the complaint. Daniel took the papers, his face instantly darkening. Mom, are you really going to be this cruel? You were the one who was cruel first, I said calmly. Fine, great. He suddenly raised his voice, attracting the attention of people nearby. My own mother is suing her son. Everyone, come and see this. My wife is pregnant, and she's trying to drive us into the ground. Jessica played her part, cradling her stomach as tears welled up in her eyes. Grandma, how can you do this? Do you want your grandchild to be born into debt? I stood up and looked them straight in the eye. Jessica, just yesterday you were telling me the money was a gift. Today I'm driving you into the ground? Her tears stopped instantly, her face turning pale. Daniel, I said, turning to my son, I'm giving you one last chance. Admit you were wrong and return the money now, and I will drop the lawsuit. The money's been invested. I can't get it out, he said through gritted teeth. Mom, if you insist on doing this, then don't blame me for being heartless. What are you going to do? Brenda demanded. Daniel sneered and pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. This is an itemized bill for my mother's rent, utilities, and food for the 5 years she lived with us. If we're going to settle accounts, let's settle everything. I took the papers, my hands shaking. It was a detailed list of so-called expenses. Rent at $3,000 a month, utilities at $500, food at $2,000, totaling $320,000 over 5 years. Brenda, was trembling with rage. Eleanor worked like a horse in your home, and you have the audacity to charge her for it? She did that voluntarily, Daniel said, defiant. Besides, what mother counts pennies with her own son? I looked at the boy who once hugged me and said, "Mommy, I love you most in the world," now a cold, calculating animal, and my heart shattered. "Fine," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's settle everything." For the past 5 years, I cooked 3 meals a day. At the market rate for a personal chef, that's $50 a meal, $150 a day. That comes to over $54,000 a year, or $270,000 for 5 years. I cleaned the house twice a week. At a market rate of $200 per cleaning, that's over $20,000 a year, or $100,000 for 5 years. I did your laundry and ironing. Let's call it $1,000 a month, which is $60,000 for 5 years. I stared into Daniel's shocked eyes. The grand total for my services is $430,000. Subtracting the $320,000 you've calculated, you still owe me $110,000. Add that to the $500,000 from the trust, and you owe me a total of $610,000. Please pay me as soon as possible. Daniel's face turned beet red. This is extortion. No, this is the market rate, Mr. Peterson said coolly. Mrs. Vance's calculations are quite reasonable. Mom. Daniel suddenly dropped to his knees. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. The money. I really did invest it in Jessica's cousin's project, and it's all gone. Are you really going to watch your son go bankrupt? I watched his pathetic performance, my heart dead. Even now, he was still lying. Mr. Vance, a court clerk emerged. The judge will see both parties for mediation now. In the mediation room, the judge was a kind-looking, middle-aged woman. She sighed after reviewing our documents. Family disputes are best resolved through negotiation. Mrs. Vance, do you really want to sue your own son? Your Honor, my voice trembled. It's not that I want to sue him. It's that he first stole the retirement money my late husband left for me. That money was half mine anyway, Daniel interjected. Quiet, the judge rapped her gavel. Mr. Vance, you altered a trust document and forged a signature. That is a criminal offense. If Mrs. Vance proceeds with the lawsuit, you could face prison time. Hearing this, Jessica panicked. Your Honor, we're willing to pay it back. We're just a little short on cash right now. Can we do it in installments? Fine, I said immediately. Sign a repayment agreement and use your house as collateral. No, Daniel jumped up. That's our marital home. Then I'll see you in court, I said, standing to leave. Wait. Jessica grabbed my arm. We'll sign. Daniel glared at her, but she stood her ground. We can buy another house, but if you go to jail, what will happen to me and the baby? In the end, under the judge's supervision, Daniel signed a repayment agreement. He admitted to misappropriating the $500,000 trust fund and promised to pay it back within 5 years, using their property as collateral. If he defaulted, I had the right to force the sale of the house. Leaving the courthouse, Daniel's face was ashen. Are you satisfied now, Mom? No, I'm not, I said, looking him in the eye. I would be much more satisfied if my son were an honest man. Spare me the lecture, he sneered. You had this condo all along, but you pretended to be helpless and lived with us. You were just testing me, weren't you? I shook my head and said no more. Some people will never admit their own faults, they just blame others. Back home, I collapsed on the sofa, exhausted. It seemed I had won the legal battle, but my heart felt empty. Using the law against my own son was not something to celebrate. Brenda came to see me that evening with good news. Eleanor, I contacted the lifelong learning program at the community college. They'd like to invite you to teach a calligraphy class. You've always loved it, right? I managed a weak smile. Thanks, but I'm not really in the mood right now. Don't dwell on it, Brenda said, patting my arm. Starting today, you begin a new life. A new life. Yes. At 62, maybe life was just beginning. I no longer had to be anyone's maid, no longer had to walk on eggshells. I could finally live for myself. The next morning, I woke up early, made a cup of tea, and sat on the balcony practicing my calligraphy. The gentle sunlight fell on the paper, and the brush moved with a steady, confident hand. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, is this Miss Eleanor Vance? A man's voice asked. I'm Mark Evans, the principal at Lincoln Elementary. I heard you've retired, and I'd like to invite you to come and mentor our young teachers. Lincoln Elementary. It was the last school where I had taught. After hanging up, I looked out at the sunshine, a smile forming on my lips. Life, it seemed, would be kind to those who were brave enough to start over. The gates of Lincoln Elementary were just as I remembered. I stood at the entrance, watching the children run and play, feeling like I was in another world. I had only been retired for 2 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. Mrs. Vance, Principal Evans called, walking over to greet me. I'm so glad you could come. I smiled and shook his hand. Mr. Evans was about 10 years younger than me. I had recommended him for the vice principal position before I retired, and now he was in charge. You look wonderful, he said, leading me towards the main building. How are you adjusting to retired life? It's been fine, I said, glossing over the turmoil of the past few weeks. Mr. Evans, you mentioned you needed me to mentor some young teachers? Yes, he said, opening the door to the conference room. Especially the new teachers in the English department. They lack experience and have trouble with classroom management. It would be a great help if you could come in once a week, observe a few classes, and give them some advice. 7 or 8 young teachers were sitting in the conference room. They all stood and greeted me when I entered. I recognized a few of them as student teachers I had mentored. Mrs. Vance, a young woman with a ponytail, said excitedly, It's so good to have you back. We've been at our wits' end with our classes lately. I couldn't help but smile. It felt good to be needed again. After the meeting, Mr. Evans pulled me aside. Actually, Mrs. Vance, there's a special class I was hoping you might consider taking on, the 6th grade honors class. It was your class before you retired. We've gone through 3 different teachers since, and none of them have been able to handle them. The 6th grade honors class. They were notoriously the most challenging group in the school. I had just managed to get them into shape before I left. How did they revert so quickly? Let me think about it, I said, not wanting to commit too quickly. I had just found my own rhythm and did not want to be tied down so soon. As I was leaving the school, I ran into a former colleague, Susan. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. Eleanor, what are you doing here? Daniel told everyone you moved out of state to live with relatives. Susan, I said with a weary smile, I just moved out on my own. On your own? She looked me up and down. Where did you get a place? I bought it a while ago and was renting it out, I explained briefly. I've taken it back for myself now. Susan looked stunned. My goodness, that boy Daniel has been telling everyone you were destitute and homeless. He even organized the teachers at school to go looking for you. My heart sank. What game was Daniel playing now? When I got home, I immediately turned on my phone. I had kept it off for peace and quiet. Sure enough, there were dozens of unread messages and missed calls, mostly from Daniel and his colleagues. The messages were all similar. Mrs. Vance, Daniel is very worried about you. Please call back. Ma'am, Daniel said you might have been scammed. Where are you? Mom, where on earth are you? I've called the police. The latest one was from Daniel, sent half an hour ago. Mom, I found out you have a condo at Sunnyvale Gardens. You've been hiding it from me all this time. I scoffed and did not reply. So what if he found out? It was my property. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw Brenda holding several grocery bags. Figured you hadn't been eating properly, she announced as she came in. I brought your favorites: barbecued ribs, steamed fish, and garlic green beans. I helped her set the table and told her about my visit to the school. When she heard that Daniel was telling everyone I was homeless, Brenda slammed her hand on the table. That ungrateful monster. He's the one who stole your money, and he has the nerve to play the part of the devoted son. Forget it, I said, taking a piece of rib. Let's not talk about him. What's the news about the community college? Classes start next Monday, Brenda said excitedly. 2 calligraphy classes a week. The students are all retired professionals and teachers. It'll be right up your alley. As we were talking, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was the young man from building management. Miss Vance, there's a Mr. Vance downstairs who says he's your son. He's insisting on coming up. What should I do? Brenda and I exchanged a look. Daniel had found me. Let him come up, I said, putting down my chopsticks. I had to face him sooner or later. 5 minutes later, Daniel was standing at my door, panting. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot. Mom? He saw Brenda, and his face hardened. So it was you. You convinced my mom to move out. Brenda was about to retort, but I raised a hand to stop her. Daniel, if you have something to say it. Mom? He suddenly dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. The money. I'll pay it back. Please just come home. I watched his over-the-top performance, my heart as still as water. He had done the same thing at the courthouse, kneeling and apologizing, only to turn on me the moment he got up. The money will be handled according to the legal agreement, I said calmly. As for coming home, this is my home. Daniel looked around the apartment, a flash of greed in his eyes. Mom, when did you buy this place? Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell you? So you could find a way to cheat me out of this too? Brenda sneered. Brenda. Daniel, shut up. This is our family business. It's none of your concern. That's enough. I slammed my hand on the table. Daniel, you are not welcome here. Please leave. Mom, he looked at me in disbelief. You're kicking out your own son for an outsider? Brenda is not an outsider, I said, looking him straight in the eye. And you, Daniel, you have disappointed me more than I can say. His face twisted into a mask of rage. Fine. Great. You think you're so special with this stupid little condo. You just wait. He slammed the door on his way out. The loud bang echoed down the hallway, making my heart tremble. Don't listen to him, Brenda said, patting my hand. He's not worth your tears. I shook my head, fighting to hold back the tears. No matter what, he was still the child I had raised. The next morning, I received a call from Principal Evans. Mrs. Vance, there's been an incident. Daniel came to the school this morning and caused a huge scene. He said you were mentally unstable and demanded that the school not hire you. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. Daniel would go this far. Mr. Evans, Don't worry, he interrupted. We all know what kind of person you are. But for safety's sake, it's probably best if you stay away from the school for a while. After hanging up, I sat on the sofa, a chill spreading through me. Daniel was trying to cut off all my paths. Brenda rushed over as soon as she heard. That animal, she seethed. I'm calling a lawyer right now to sue him for defamation. Wait, I said, a thought suddenly occurring to me. Brenda, why do you think Daniel is so afraid of me going back to work? Because he's afraid of you being financially independent and no longer under his control, of course. I shook my head. No, it's more than that. He's afraid I'll come into contact with something he doesn't want me to know. A wild theory began to form in my mind. I immediately called my former colleague, Susan. Susan, can you do me a favor? What exactly did Daniel say about me at the school? And has he been acting strangely there recently? Susan promised to ask around. After hanging up, I pulled out a small box of Arthur's belongings. It contained his personal effects, which I had never gone through carefully, feeling it was an invasion of his privacy. But now, Eleanor, what are you looking for? Brenda asked. I don't know, I said, carefully opening the box. I just have a feeling. Inside were Arthur's fountain pen, his pocket watch, a few old coins, and an old photograph. It was a picture of a young Arthur holding a baby, standing in front of an unfamiliar house. On the back was written, Ming's first birthday, May 20, 1st, 1986. 1986? Daniel was born in 1987. Who was Ming? My hands began to shake. The baby in the photo had a slight resemblance to Daniel, but the dates were wrong. Brenda, my voice trembled. Was Arthur married before he met me? Brenda's face changed. Why are you suddenly asking that? Tell me the truth. She sighed heavily. Arthur did have a short-lived marriage to a woman he knew in college, but it was long before he met you. The woman gave birth and then took off. Arthur raised the child alone until he was 3. Then he met you. I felt the floor drop out from under me. So, Daniel is not my biological son. He's the son of Arthur's ex-wife. Why did he never tell me? He was afraid you'd mind, Brenda explained softly. And he was afraid Daniel would be hurt. The boy was only 3 when he came into your life. He didn't remember anything. So Arthur made everyone promise to keep it a secret. I collapsed onto the sofa. 30+ years of memories flashed through my mind. Why Daniel didn't look like me. Why Arthur always seemed to favor him. The phone rang. It was Susan. Eleanor, I found out something. Daniel has been spending a lot of time in the school's records office, looking through old files, specifically your husband's personnel file from back in the day. A jolt went through me. What was Daniel looking for? Could it be that he knew, too? The morning sun filtered through the curtains. I opened my eyes, momentarily confused about where I was. After learning the truth about Daniel's parentage last night, I had tossed and turned, only managing to fall asleep in the early hours of the morning. The photograph on my nightstand was still there. Arthur, holding the infant named Ming, smiling brightly. 1986. He didn't even know me then. That child was now my son, Daniel. I picked up my phone. There were 3 missed calls, all from Susan. There was also a text message. Eleanor, call me back as soon as possible. Important discovery. Susan, I said as I immediately called back. Eleanor. Her voice was urgent. I found it. Daniel has been in frequent contact with a woman named Veronica Thorne. She's in her late 50s. They say she's his biological mother. My fingers went numb, and the phone almost slipped from my hand. Daniel's biological mother. The ex-wife who had abandoned him. And there's something else? Susan continued. Daniel was looking for records in the school archives related to a loan project your husband managed back then. It seems to have some connection to that woman. A loan project. My husband had been the head of the credit department at a bank. He handled countless projects. Why was Daniel suddenly interested in this one? Susan, can you find out which project it was? I'll try, but no promises. By the way, your husband's old assistant, Mr. Lewis, is still at the bank. Maybe you should ask him? After hanging up, I immediately found Mr. Lewis's number in my contacts. He had been Arthur's most trusted subordinate, and we still kept in touch occasionally after he retired. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Lewis said, surprised to hear from me. It's been a long time. After a few pleasantries, I got straight to the point. Mr. Lewis, I need to look into a loan project Arthur handled around 1986. It might be connected to a woman named Veronica Thorne. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Mrs. Vance, why are you asking about this now? Someone else is looking into it. I need to know the truth. Mr. Lewis sighed heavily. Veronica was Arthur's ex-wife. In '86, she came back with the child, claiming her business had failed and she was in debt to loan sharks. Arthur had a soft heart. He broke regulations to approve a loan for her. The whole thing was discovered later, and he nearly lost his job. My heart pounded. So, Arthur had risked his career for his ex-wife and child. What happened to the loan? Veronica took the money and disappeared. The loan became a bad debt. Arthur paid back most of it himself. The rest was written off by the bank. Mr. Lewis paused. Mrs. Vance, this is something Arthur always felt deeply guilty about. He felt he had wronged you. After hanging up, I sat by the window, my thoughts in a whirlwind. Arthur had never told me about this. Was it because he was afraid I would be angry? Or because he could never truly let go of his ex-wife? The doorbell rang. It was Brenda, holding a file folder. Eleanor, I got the information on Veronica Thorne. Inside the folder was a background check. Veronica Thorne, 58, currently the CFO of an investment firm. Divorced, no children. Wait, No children? Then who was Daniel? Here, Brenda pointed to a small line of text. Married Arthur Vance in 1983, divorced in 1986. During the marriage, they adopted a boy named Daniel Vance. Custody was granted to Arthur Vance after the divorce. Adopted. Daniel wasn't Veronica's biological son either. Then who were his real parents? Brenda, my voice trembled. Help me find out the truth about Daniel's birth. That afternoon, I went to the community college for my first calligraphy class as scheduled. The classroom was filled with about 20 silver-haired students, all looking vibrant and energetic. They applauded warmly when I walked in. Hello, everyone, I said, standing at the front, trying to focus. Today, we'll be learning the basic strokes of standard script. The 2-hour class passed quickly. Afterwards, the students surrounded me with questions, some even showing me their work for critique. This feeling of being respected and needed allowed me to temporarily forget the morning's shocking revelations. After class, the dean asked to speak with me. Mrs. Vance, I hear you were a star teacher at Lincoln Elementary. Would you be interested in teaching a classical literature appreciation course here as well? I gladly accepted. My retirement was suddenly becoming fuller than I had ever expected. When I got home, Brenda was waiting for me at the door, her face grim. Eleanor, I found it. Daniel was adopted from the city orphanage. His biological parents are unknown. I let out a long breath, not knowing if it was relief or disappointment. At least he wasn't Arthur's child with his ex-wife. But there's something more alarming. Brenda lowered her voice. Veronica has been contacting Daniel frequently. It seems they're planning something. Just then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello, is this Eleanor Vance? A woman's voice, cold and arrogant, asked. This is Veronica Thorne, Daniel's mother. We need to talk. I gripped the phone. About what? About the inheritance my son deserves, she said, enunciating each word. Arthur Vance left behind more than just that little trust fund. Brenda was gesturing wildly for me to hang up, but on some strange impulse, I agreed. Fine. When and where? Tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. The coffee shop at the Grand Hotel. She paused. And, don't bring that Brenda friend of yours. Otherwise, the deal is off. After hanging up, Brenda was frantic. Eleanor, this is obviously a trap. I know, I said calmly, but I need to know what she wants. The next day, I went to the Grand Hotel alone. In a corner of the coffee shop, a well-dressed, middle-aged woman waved me over. She was impeccably maintained, with sharp features and a certain resemblance to Daniel in her eyes. Mrs. Vance, she said with a fake smile, I've heard so much about you. I cut to the chase. You said Arthur left something else behind. What is it? What's the rush? She said, slowly stirring her coffee. Let's talk about my son first. Do you know why he's been so cruel to you? My heart tightened. Why? Because he's known since he was a child that he wasn't your biological son, Veronica sneered. Arthur, that hypocrite, pretended to treat him equally, but he was always guarding against him. As for you, you only have eyes for your own biological child, don't you? I was thunderstruck. I don't have any other children. Don't play dumb, she raised an eyebrow. Arthur told me. You had a daughter the second year you were married, but you gave her away. I trembled. This was utterly preposterous. Arthur and I never had children. Miss Thorne, I said, forcing myself to remain calm. What do you want? She took a document from her purse. This is proof of Arthur's illegal loan approval back in the day. If this gets out, his reputation will be ruined, even in death. I want you to drop your claim to the $500,000 trust fund. In exchange, I'll keep this secret. I took the document. It did have Arthur's signature and the bank's official seal, dated March 1986. We weren't married yet. This doesn't threaten me, I said, pushing the document back to her. Arthur has been gone for years. I don't care about this. What about Daniel, then? She sneered. If he knew you cared more about money than his father's reputation. Miss Thorne, I stood up. Daniel is a grown man. He has the right to know the truth. As for the money, the court has already ruled. It's out of my hands. Her face changed. Eleanor Vance, you'll regret this. Leaving the hotel, I stood in the sunlight, feeling a deep chill. Veronica's appearance had solved some mysteries why Daniel hated me, why he was so obsessed with the money. But this lie about a daughter, where did that come from? When I returned home, I found someone waiting at my door. Daniel. He was dressed in a suit, his expression dark, a file folder in his hand. Mom, his voice was ice. We need to talk. I stood in the doorway, not immediately letting him in. Our last encounter was still fresh in my mind, and the threats from his mother, Veronica, made me even more wary. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here, I said, keeping my distance. Daniel let out a cold laugh and held up the file folder. Mom, do you know why Dad was always so distant with me? Because he had a dark secret. My heart seized. Another secret about my husband. Veronica had just threatened me, and now Daniel was here. What secret? He embezzled money, Daniel said through gritted teeth. In 1986, he approved a fraudulent loan for a relative. A huge amount. If the bank hadn't shown him mercy for his years of service, he would have gone to prison. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It was the same story Veronica had told. Daniel, I said calmly, I know about that. The loan was for your birth mother, Veronica. Arthur paid most of it back himself. His face twisted. You knew? Then why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That your father nearly lost his job to save your mother? That he lived with guilt for all those years? Lies! He suddenly shouted. Dad never loved me. He was always guarding against me, afraid I would steal the inheritance meant for his real daughter. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. This lie about a daughter, again. Daniel, your father and I never had any other children. That is a lie Veronica made up. Is it? He sneered, pulling a piece of paper from the folder. Then what's this? It was a copy of a birth certificate. Name, Claire Vance. Sex, female. Date of birth, May 15th, 1980. 8. Father, Arthur Vance. Mother, Eleanor Vance. My hands began to shake violently. The certificate looked so real, the seal, the signatures, everything. But Arthur and I never had a child. This is a forgery. My voice trembled. Mom, stop pretending, Daniel said, his eyes welling with tears. I've been searching for years, and I finally found proof. Dad left everything good for this Claire, while I'm just an adopted son, unworthy of his inheritance. I looked at his hysterical face, my heart breaking. The child I had raised for over 30 years had been completely blinded by such a ridiculous lie. Daniel, I said, fighting back tears. Look at me. In all these years, have I ever mistreated you in any way? When you were sick, who stayed up all night? When you started school, who drove you back and forth, rain or shine? When you got married, who gave you their life savings? He hesitated for a moment, but his expression quickly hardened again. That's because you didn't know Claire existed. If you had, would you still have been so good to me? I shook my head, too weary to argue anymore. Some people would rather believe a carefully crafted lie than face a painful truth. Mom, his tone suddenly softened. If you drop the claim to the $500,000, I'm willing to continue being your son. Or else what? I looked him straight in the eye. Or else I'll expose Dad's scandal and the existence of Claire to everyone. I'll let the whole world know how you two hypocrites treated your adopted son. I looked at his contorted face and suddenly felt a sense of release. The child I once loved with all my heart now stood before me like a cruel stranger. Daniel, I said calmly, go ahead and expose whatever you want. As for the money, I won't give up a single cent. Fine. Great, he said, taking a step back, his face twisted in a snarl. Eleanor Vance, you just wait. You're going to be ruined. With that, he slammed the door and left. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak. The forged birth certificate slipped from my hand and fluttered to the floor. When Brenda rushed over, I was still sitting in the living room in a daze, clutching that absurd piece of paper. This is insane. Brenda fumed after seeing it. I've known you and Arthur forever. I would know if you had a daughter. I'm calling the lawyer right now and suing them for defamation. It's no use, I said with a bitter laugh. You can't reason with crazy people. No, Brenda said firmly. This is forgery of a public document. It's a crime. And I'm going to find out who this Claire is and why she's pretending to be your daughter. The next day, Brenda brought shocking news. She had found a woman named Claire Vance living in the city, 34 years old, single, working for a multinational corporation. What was even stranger was that her official records showed she was adopted. The names of the adoptive parents were Arthur Vance and Eleanor Vance. That's impossible, I trembled. I've never adopted a child. Someone obviously falsified the records, Brenda said, her face grim. Eleanor, this is serious. Someone is pulling the strings behind Veronica and Daniel. I suddenly remembered Arthur's words on his deathbed. Eleanor, never put all your eggs in one basket. Daniel is a good son, but people change. At the time, I thought he was just being paranoid. Now, I wondered if he had known something all along. Brenda, my voice shook. Can you look into Arthur's whereabouts in the months before he died? Specifically, did he ever meet with Veronica? That afternoon, I went to the community college as scheduled. The moment I walked into the classroom, I could feel something was wrong. The students were clustered in small groups, whispering. When they saw me, they immediately fell silent, their gazes strange. Is something wrong? I asked the class representative. Mrs. Vance, he hesitated. Someone was handing out flyers at the school entrance today. They said you. Said what about me? That you and your husband abused your adopted son and favored your biological daughter. He handed me a flyer. On it was a picture of me and Arthur with a sensational headline, "The True Face of the Hypocritical Teacher Eleanor Vance." The content was filled with the lies concocted by Daniel and Veronica, and it even included a copy of the forged birth certificate. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and my vision blurred. Daniel had actually done this. For $500,000, he was willing to publicly humiliate the mother who raised him. Mrs. Vance, the representative said with concern, none of us believe this. Should we call the police? Thank you. I'll handle it, I said, forcing myself to remain composed. I taught the class, but my mind was elsewhere. When I got home, I found the same flyers plastered all over my front door. The property manager rushed over. Miss Vance, a man was just here posting these. We tried to make him leave, but he was cursing at us. What did he look like? In his 30s, wearing a suit, his eyes were a little red. Daniel. He had come here himself to post these lies about me. Just as I was about to go inside, my phone rang. It was Principal Evans. Mrs. Vance, we have a problem. Someone posted these rumors about you on the school's official website and social media today. It's causing a lot of trouble. The school board has decided to suspend your mentorship role until this is cleared up. I felt like I had fallen into an icy abyss. Daniel and Veronica were trying to completely destroy my reputation and my life. When Brenda arrived, I was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by the vicious flyers. Eleanor, she said, pulling me into a hug. Don't be afraid. I've already contacted the lawyer. This is clear-cut slander and character assassination. They're in deep trouble. Brenda, my voice was hoarse. Help me find this Claire. I need to know why she's going along with this lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every footstep I heard outside made me jump. Was it Daniel? Was it someone Veronica had sent? At 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Vance, my name is Claire. I'm so sorry. I've been used. Can we please meet and talk? I stared at the message, my heart pounding. This daughter I had never met. Who was she really? The morning sun streamed through the curtains. I opened my eyes, unsure for a moment if last night's text message had been a dream. I picked up my phone. The message was still there, sitting quietly in my inbox. After much hesitation, I replied, "Okay, when and where?" The reply came quickly. Today at noon. 3rd floor reading room of the city's main library. Please come alone. Brenda was vehemently opposed. This is obviously a trap. What if she's working with Veronica? I have to find out, I said, gripping my phone. I need to know why she's pretending to be my daughter. Then I'll follow you secretly, Brenda said. If there's any trouble, call the police immediately. At noon, I arrived at the library alone. The third-floor reading room was quiet and spacious, with only a few people scattered about. I chose a table by the window and sat down, my heart pounding. "Mrs. Vance," a soft voice said from behind me. I turned to see a woman in her early 30s. She was wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, no makeup. There was a strange familiarity in her features. "I'm Claire," she said quietly, nervously twisting her fingers. "I'm so sorry for all the trouble I've caused you." I motioned for her to sit, studying her unfamiliar face. She did look a little like me when I was young, but she looked much more like Arthur. "Who are you, really?" I asked directly. I am Arthur Vance's daughter," she said, her voice even quieter. "But I'm not yours." I felt like I had been struck by lightning. "What does that mean?" "My mother is Veronica Thorne," she said, looking up, her eyes filled with tears. "I was born in 1988. My father was Arthur Vance. They had already been divorced for 2 years. My mind went blank. So, Arthur and Veronica had kept in touch after their divorce. And had a daughter? Impossible, my voice trembled. Arthur wasn't that kind of man. It's true. She handed me a DNA test report. It was done last week. It confirms with 99.99% certainty that I am Arthur Vance's daughter. I mechanically took the report, my vision blurring. Arthur had betrayed me. He had been with his ex-wife after we were married. "Mrs. Vance," Claire said urgently, "my mother used me. She forged your name on my documents and made me believe I was the child you and my father abandoned. It wasn't until I saw those flyers yesterday that I learned the truth." "What truth?" "That I wasn't abandoned by you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You never even knew I existed. My father raised me in secret, until he died." I felt like I was plunging into an icy void. Arthur had secretly raised his daughter with his ex-wife during our marriage. All those late nights at work, all those business trips, were all to see this child. "How old are you?" My voice was hoarse. 34. Born May 15th, 1988. I quickly did the math. In 1988, Arthur and I had been married for 2 years. That year, he did work late quite often. "Mrs. Vance," Claire suddenly knelt before me. "I am so sorry. My mother lied and told me you knew about me, but cruelly abandoned me. I've hated you for so many years, only to find out now that you're a victim, too." I looked at her sobbing face, a mix of emotions churning inside me. This daughter who had appeared out of nowhere was both the proof of Arthur's betrayal and an innocent victim. "Get up," I said softly. "Your mother, Veronica, why did she do all this?" "Money," Claire said with a bitter smile. "Her business failed, and she's in debt to loan sharks. She heard my father had left a trust fund and wanted to use Daniel's status as an adopted son to get it." "Wait," I suddenly caught a key phrase. "You said Daniel's status as an adopted son? Daniel isn't Veronica's biological child?" "No," Claire shook her head. "Daniel was adopted by my father and Veronica in 1983, before they divorced. When they split, my father got custody." I was thunderstruck. So, Daniel was neither Veronica's nor Arthur's biological son. Then his real story. "Mrs. Vance," Claire handed me a USB drive. "I've collected evidence here. My mother and Daniel forged your adoption records to get the $500,000 trust. Also, Daniel has been looking into a loan project my father handled, something about a large sum of missing money." I took the drive, my fingers trembling. This was far more complicated than I had imagined. Not just a forged birth certificate, but missing millions. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked warily. Because I don't want to be used by my mother anymore," Claire said, her eyes tearful. "And because you were the one my father truly loved. Before he died, he told me his biggest regret in life was hurting you." A sharp pain pierced my chest. Arthur had been thinking of me at the end. "When did he tell you this?" "The week before he passed," she said softly. "He had a high fever and was delirious. He kept calling your name. He said, 'Eleanor, I'm sorry about Claire.'" My tears finally broke free. The Claire Arthur had mentioned. I always thought he was just rambling, but he was saying her name. "Where is he buried?" I suddenly asked. Hillcrest Cemetery. East Section, Row 18, Plot 6, Claire said. I visit him every week. Hillcrest Cemetery. That was not where Arthur and I had planned to be buried. We had chosen plots together at Pine Ridge Memorial Park, on the west side of the city, where we loved to watch the sunset. Mrs. Vance, Claire asked cautiously, can you forgive my father? I didn't answer. 30 years of marriage, built on such a lie. How could I ever forgive? Back home, I plugged the USB drive into my computer. The files were staggering. Not only were there all the forged documents from Veronica and Daniel, but there were also internal files from the loan project Arthur had managed. The amount was $5 million. The borrower was a shell corporation, but the actual beneficiary was Veronica. What was more shocking was that the money had later vanished. The bank's investigation went nowhere, and it was eventually written off as a bad debt. Arthur was suspected of being involved and was nearly indicted, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. I collapsed into my chair, my vision blurred. How many more secrets had Arthur been hiding? When Brenda arrived, I had gone through most of the files. Her face was grim after she reviewed them. Eleanor, this is big. $5 million was an astronomical sum in the 80s. Arthur couldn't have done this alone. You mean? Veronica had to have help. Most likely from a high-level executive inside the bank, Brenda said, pointing to a signature on a document. Look, the approval signature is from a Director Evans. He's now the head of the city's banking commission. I gasped. If someone at that level was involved. Brenda, my voice trembled. I need to go to Hillcrest Cemetery. Now? She looked at me concerned. You're in no state. I have to go, I said firmly. There are some things I need to ask Arthur, face to face. That afternoon, Brenda drove me to Hillcrest Cemetery. East Section, Row 18, Plot 6. A simple black granite headstone. It was engraved, Arthur Vance, beloved father. There was no name of the person who placed it, and no mention of him as a husband. I knelt before the grave, my fingers tracing the cold stone. It had been 5 years. This was the first time I had come to see him, and it was under these circumstances. Arthur, I whispered, you owe me an explanation. A breeze rustled the pine trees beside the grave, a whispering sound like his reply. Brenda silently retreated, giving me space. I took out the book of Robert Frost poems we both loved, turning to the dog-eared page with "The Road Not Taken." We had promised that whoever passed first, the other would read this poem at their grave. I never imagined it would be like this. Arthur, I choked out, you lied to me for 30 years. But why? Why can't I bring myself to hate you? The setting sun cast a golden glow on the headstone. I wiped my tears, stood up, and made a decision. Brenda, help me contact the media. I'm holding a press conference. I'm going to reveal everything. The press conference was set for 3 days later at the downtown media center. In those 3 days, Brenda, Claire, and I compiled all the evidence. The forged birth certificates, the altered records, the missing loan money, and the records of threats from Veronica and Daniel. Eleanor, Brenda said, looking at me with concern. Are you sure you want to do this? It means making Arthur's past public. I'm not making his past public, I said calmly. I'm exposing the crimes of Veronica and Daniel. Arthur has already paid the price for his mistakes. Claire sat quietly in the corner, her expression conflicted. This daughter, who had appeared so suddenly, had been helping us non-stop, even providing copies of Veronica's private ledgers, which clearly detailed how she had colluded with bank insiders to embezzle the $5 million. Mrs. Vance, she said softly. My mother called today. She said if I keep helping you, she will disown me. I looked at her eyes, so much like Arthur's, and my heart softened. You can back out. She is, after all, your mother. No, Claire said, shaking her head firmly. My father told me before he died that you have to be an honest person. I can't let her continue to hurt innocent people. On the day of the press conference, the room was packed. Besides the reporters, many of my old colleagues from the banking world were there. Even Director Evans had sent a representative. I stood at the podium in a simple navy blue suit, took a deep breath, and faced the flashing cameras. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My voice was steady. I am here today to expose a case of financial fraud and character assassination that has gone on for over 30 years. Over the next hour, I detailed how Veronica and Daniel had forged documents, altered records, and spread vicious rumors to try to steal the trust fund. When I presented the evidence showing where the $5 million had gone, a gasp went through the room. Director Evans's name was clearly on the key documents. Finally, my voice cracking, I said, "And I must clear up one final lie. Miss Claire Vance is indeed the daughter of Arthur Vance, but she is not my daughter. She is the child he had with his ex-wife Veronica after their divorce. I only learned of her existence last week." Claire came to the stage and showed the press the DNA report and her real birth certificate. The flashes intensified, and reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Vance, will you be pressing charges against Veronica and Daniel? Miss Vance, what are your thoughts on your mother's actions? Was Director Evans aware of the $5 million loan?" Immediately after the press conference, Director Evans was taken in for questioning by the authorities. Veronica and Daniel had vanished, and the police issued warrants for their arrest. That night, Daniel appeared at my door. He was gaunt, unshaven, a shadow of his former self. "Mom," he said, kneeling on my doorstep, his voice hoarse. "I was wrong. I was used by Veronica. She's not my real mother." "She never was," I said, standing inside the doorway, looking coldly at the adopted son to whom I had given all my love. "Daniel, you've known your real story for a long time, haven't you?" He flinched, then slowly nodded. "When I was 12, I overheard Dad talking to someone. I found out I was adopted, but Veronica found me and told me my real parents were killed by Dad. I was thunderstruck. Veronica had concocted such a venomous lie. So you hated Arthur? And you hated me?" He sobbed. "I was blinded by hate. Mom, forgive me. Don't call me Mom." My voice was ice. "The moment you threatened me, we stopped being mother and son." "Mom!" He lunged forward to grab my legs, but I stepped back and closed the door. His cries and pleas continued outside for a long time, then finally faded into silence. A month later, the case was resolved. Veronica was sentenced to 10 years in prison for financial fraud, forgery, and other charges. Daniel, as an accomplice, received a suspended sentence of 3 years with 5 years of probation. Director Evans was removed from his post, and his case was handed over to the Justice Department. Most of the $5 million was recovered and returned to the bank. Claire quit her job and moved to another city to start fresh. She came to say goodbye. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her eyes red, "I'm sorry. For my father and for myself." I patted her hand, saying nothing. This daughter who had stormed into my life had brought so much pain, but had also unraveled years of mystery. "Go visit your father sometimes," I finally said. "He's all alone at Hillcrest." "You don't hate him?" I looked out the window at the setting Sunday. Love and hate are never that simple. The community college reinstated my classes, and Lincoln Elementary rehired me as a consultant. Life seemed to be returning to normal, but I knew some things had changed forever. Brenda helped me reorganize my finances. Of the $500,000 from the trust, Daniel had already paid back $50,000. The rest would be paid in installments. With my other income, my retirement was more than secure. One evening, Brenda said mysteriously, "There's someone who wants to meet you." "Who?" "Professor Miller, the history teacher at the college. He was in your calligraphy class and has been asking about you ever since." She winked. "He's a nice man, a widower for 5 years. Kids are all grown and live out of state." I just smiled and shook my head. "Brenda, at my age? What's wrong with 62? She retorted. "Professor Miller is only 65, and he's in great shape. A few of us old friends are getting together for dinner next week. You should come." I didn't say no. She was right. At 62, maybe life was just beginning. That weekend, I went to Pine Ridge Memorial Park alone. It was the place Arthur and I had loved most. As the sun set, the entire pine forest was bathed in a golden light of breathtaking beauty. I spoke to Arthur in my heart. "I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I need to let go." The wind rustled the pine branches, a whispering sound, like his reply. Back home, I took out the Robert Frost collection, turned to The Road Not Taken, and read it softly, over and over. This time, there were no tears. Tomorrow, I would go to Hillcrest Cemetery. I would place a bouquet of white chrysanthemums on Arthur's grave, not as a wife, but as an old friend bidding a final farewell. And then, I would go to Brenda's dinner party and meet this Professor Miller. I am 62 years old, and there is so much good time still ahead of me.